Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I've hit the button. Button has been hit. We are live. We are live on the internet talking about
Beautiful.
movies.
Talking about movies. Now, Hugh, I want to talk to you about something I've been thinking about. I don't know if you remember, Hugh, a little movie that came out 3 years ago now in 2023, a little movie called Barbie. Do you remember Barbie, Hugh?
I do. I do remember Barbie.
You remember the sort of cultural discussions surrounding Barbie?
The Chronicles of the Confederacy. How could I possibly have forgotten?
If you remember, if you cast your minds, dear audience member, to the far off year of 2023 when Barbie came out, and everyone under the sun had a drastically different interpretation about the true meaning of the movie. Was it a feminist movie? Was it secretly a based anti-feminist movie? Was it every possible thing in between? Everyone had their own take. You had like religious conservatives say, "Oh, actually, Barbie's actually like a really conservative movie if you think about it," which is very funny in hindsight. But of course, obviously, the filmmakers and many people who watched the movie and really enjoyed it saw the very obvious feminist messaging. So, like, how does something like that happen? Well, you see, Barbie is a movie that had a lot of internal contradictions, right? The feminists would look at the movie and see the obvious feminist messaging and go, ah, this is a feminist movie. And they would have to ignore the fact that Ken is obviously the most sympathetic character in the movie, and it's not even close, right? And then the other side of the aisle, if you will, would see this and would see the way the movie depicts Ken and say, well, this movie might actually be kind of based because Ken is the real hero of the story, obviously. But of course, in order to take away the interpretation that Barbie is secretly anti-feminist, you need to ignore almost all of it. But that's what people did. Essentially, people saw what they wanted to see in the movie because what the movie really was a mess of contradictions, right? The movie was actually just incoherent. And as a result of being incoherent, people who were willing to ignore the parts that didn't fit could take literally any interpretation from the movie that they wanted. And they did. It's just something I wanted to bring
Wow,
up
yeah,
at the
just
beginning
something.
of
Yeah,
this
that
stream
a
for no
totally
reason, really.
unrelated thing. Anyway, hey, here we are today talking about the
Hey,
Odyssey, Nolan's The Odyssey.
just a completely irrelevant thing I thought I'd start the stream with. How you guys doing? You having a good time
I
talking about
see.
movies
I
on the
see
internet?
you're on screen. You've been living your life a quarter mile at a time. You're double
Yes.
clutching, not granny shifting, like you should. Doing a
Yes.
doing a
And we're proud
great
of you.
job. We're all proud of you here. We already have a super chat from Darkington. Thank you very much. Didn't want to
That's
say
very kind of
anything
you.
though. Very kind of you. Just
That's right.
that's a humble
He
man. A humble man. Some I saw some Stephen Lynn said my priest did a homily about the Barbie movie.
good or bad
I
or
can.
indifferent.
You're gonna please
I'd,
tell us
I'd
the
actually love
story.
to know.
I would love
And
to know what that what that
And for context, I'd
entailed.
love to know the denomination. I think that would just help color in the picture here.
The
Yeah, we're
thing,
here to
the
talk.
thing is asking why not talk about "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou." Don't worry, I'm going to bring it up. It's going to come up. You may have noticed that we've been absent for the past 2 weeks. Some life has gotten in the way of us talking about this film to this point, which is why we're talking about it now when everybody else who's relevant
Just talking about
is
Spider-Man.
has moved on to Spider-Man. um, but I did do an extensive amount of prep work for this stream because I was very excited to talk about this movie. That included rewatching "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" and Troy and rereading the entire Odyssey. So I'm very excited to both give my opinion on this and dive into what the discourse around this movie has been like. Because it's been
That's Yeah, on a related note, I have done none of those things. I haven't read the Odyssey. There would have been plenty of time to since we hadn't streamed in like 3 weeks, but I didn't anyway. But what I did do is engage in a lot of the criticism and discussion surrounding this movie, and I have found it lacking, I would say. I have been thoroughly, thoroughly unimpressed with the quality of the discussion surrounding this movie. Now, part of that is just your typical run of the mill, people don't really know how to talk about movies anymore uh, sort of thing we see with everything nowadays. You're seeing that, for instance, with the discussion around the morality of Jean Grey's behavior in the new Spider-Man movie. that's sort of what I like to think of that as sort of par for the course inability to understand storytelling. But what I've noticed with the Odyssey in particular is everyone on every side of the political aisle, the cultural divide, having wildly different interpretations of the movie and a complete inability to actually assess whether those interpretations match what the film actually is. And it's been driving me nuts, especially when I see people who I think I otherwise admire and think are pretty clever and smart, giving their takes on this movie and in my opinion, just getting it drastically wrong. So we're going to talk about that. Hugh is going to bring his knowledge of the source material, and I'm going to bring my frustration with movie
Yes.
critics. And
Now,
so
I'm
together,
afraid
by
my
our
knowledge
powers
of the source
combined.
material will not be quite as extensive as Little Platoon, friend of the pod, who was on EFAP the other day.
By the way, yeah, because I did. You might have seen I joined EFAP for their you know week one breakdown of the Odyssey. It was a good time, good discussion. Go check that out at some point if you haven't already. Little Platoon has been making some pretty solid videos on the movie. I think he's one of the few sort of getting it right, if you will. I've been impressed with his videos so far. I think he's got a couple more coming out. And he's sort of releasing them in
Yeah,
installments, but I highly recommend them. They're pretty
the first
funny.
two have been dead on. Dead,
They've been
I
pretty
believe,
down.
to quote the technical term from my cousin Vinny, dead on balls accurate is how I would describe his videos on the subject.
And really funny in a sort of mean-spirited way that I like.
Yeah, we love the energy he brings here on this channel.
Yes, we do.
Catty,
No.
catty, gay, and English. There's nothing like it.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good combo. It's working for him. Anyway,
Real quick, Bryce Moenda asked, "What translation did I read?" I am a simple man. I read the Robert Fagles version. I like the Robert Fagles version. I'm not 100% sure if that. I know it's not the most accurate, and I've learned that recently, right? But boy, is it fun to read, and I enjoy it. And I have not dipped my toes into any of the others. I have no interest in that. I just I love the way that these read. The Iliad, his translation of the Iliad, I would say is one of my top 5 books of all time, up there next to True Grit. Uh, so I
what's
recommend it.
interesting about the translation discussion is that I think everyone going into the movie thought that would be more relevant because it was reported early on that Christopher Nolan was using Emily Wilson's translation, controversial choice, as the main inspiration for his version of the movie. And then the movie came out, and I think it's fair to say that Nolan's Odyssey is not the Odyssey.
Yeah, no,
It
it's
just
not.
isn't.
It's
I think
not.
it's so inaccurate and so it has changed so much as an adaptation. We'll talk about it, whether that's good, that's bad, what there is to say about the adaptation part of it. But it is so different, so meaningfully different from the source material that I think it's fair to just not call it the Odyssey at all, which is why I will call it Nolan's Odyssey and why I will
Based on the
fully
book of the
intend
same name.
and why I will fully intend to describe him as either Matt Damon or John Odyssey as much as possible, because he's just not Odysseus. And the funny thing about the translation discussion being ultimately irrelevant because he did his own thing, if you will. It's not like he really based his off of Emily Wilson's translation anyway, such that Emily
Emily Wilson.
Wilson clearly motivated a bit to clear her name after his association was like, please do not associate this garbage with my translation. Gave a rather scathing review. I don't even remember
I don't
what
remember
outlet it was
all of
in.
the bits of it. The one that I
It
do
was called
remember
An
the most.
Uncomplicated Man, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, the one that I do remember the most that I never in a million years would I have thought to find myself agreeing with anything Emily Wilson had to say about anything. However, one of the lines, one of the critiques of the film that she gave was, and I quote, "The food looked disgusting and there were no sex scenes. This movie was bad." Basically, something along those lines. Never would have thought ugly food and Charlize didn't get them titties out would have been the criticism from Emily Wilson, renowned feminist translator, heavy air quotes, of the Odyssey. But there we are. You know what? A broken
You know, it's
clock
funny.
is right twice a day.
She ended up writing two articles, two reviews about it. I only read the first one because when she dropped the second one, I was like, "Oh, listen, we get it. It's time to. You made all your points in the first one. You're fine." Someone in the chat has said, "Where is it?" Emily Wilson called out Nolan. No, what is it? Emily Wilson hated Nolan's Odyssey for woke reasons. Kind of. There were
Partially.
some criticisms that she made that I was like, "All right, well, calm down." That hardly seems like a relevant critique. But no, a lot of her criticisms were mostly born, I think, out of a genuine love for the source material. Genuinely, which, despite what you would say about some of the choices she made when translating it, in terms of like demasculinizing it and all that sort of stuff, which she said explicitly she was trying to do in certain respects, um, she clearly likes the Odyssey. I don't think you do a translation of the Odyssey if you don't like it a lot
Yeah, she did an
deep
Iliad
down.
translation too that I saw
You know what I
recently.
mean? Like that, she clearly kind of loves it for what it actually is to some degree. And most of her criticisms were not especially uh, woke or ideological, I suppose we should say. I found many of her criticisms quite funny and valid,
Yep.
actually. And I appreciated, there was a sassiness to it that I appreciated because she did not have to, for example, say that she found many of Nolan's movies boring. That was completely
Yeah,
unrelated,
that was
but it's
just
very funny.
I'm just gonna tack this on here at the end here. I think Christopher Nolan is a hack, actually.
Oh, first
Emily.
paragraph. Unlike some of Nolan's other films, The Odyssey is not boring, thanks to
Ooh.
the source material, which is impossible to mess up entirely. You know what? I love that energy.
You know, Emily,
I'll just
I
say
was
that.
unfamiliar with your game. Perhaps I judged you too harshly.
Yeah. But, so ultimately the translation choice didn't end up being very relevant to the discussion because Nolan basically did his own translation, heavy air quotes, as well. Basically, he changed so much. I think it's actually fair to describe it as not the Odyssey. Now, here's the question, Hugh. This is probably the first place we should start. And we'll get to your overall thoughts in a minute. But what a lot of people will say in reaction to those criticisms is like, oh, they'll look at history and go, oh, well, you see, it's part of an oral tradition. People are always retelling stories and changing them and adapting them to modern circumstances and stuff like that. But I think every adaptation that shares a name with the source material and that is relying on the source material to sell itself to you has a line at which point it stops being the original thing in a way that I think it's reasonable to find frustrating or disinteresting at the very least, right? Like, you can't just look at the history of oral traditions and retelling of stories and adaptations and go, oh, well, that means it's perfectly reasonable to call your movie The Odyssey, but then just completely fundamentally change what it is. I think it's reasonable to find it frustrating at the very least, or at least disappointing, that this movie was not a faithful adaptation of the story that it is selling itself with. Right? I think it is because a lot of people go like, "Oh, well, what did you expect it to be accurate?" It's like, yeah, kind of. I did
I,
actually.
you
I
know,
kind of hoped that a movie called The Odyssey would be The Odyssey, that it wouldn't steal or borrow things from other stories of the time in order to undermine and fundamentally change what it's supposed to be, that it wouldn't like modernize the story in so much that it is basically now like a Vietnam War movie more than it is a movie about ancient Greece. I find that disappointing. I think if you change something that much, you might as well also change the name. You might as well also change the setting. I think it's reasonable, and I would like to defend here the people that actually expected this movie to be an adaptation of the Odyssey, which it basically isn't.
yeah, that's fair. Well, and I think one of the things that Platoon had said, right, is that you could infer, and I don't know if Nolan has been upfront about this or not, but I think you can infer from the way that he decided to, and there's a good term that's been tossed around by a few people in the chat so far, is localized rather than translated or adapted. It's it's kind of a term for like what happens in Jamie in anime when you like if you one to one translate a joke from Japanese, it very likely won't play for well for an American audience if it's
Perfectly, yeah.
yeah, or not perfectly. So a localizer will change that joke to something that fits the spirit but resonates better with an American audience. For example, I think one of the most infamous examples of localization that I can remember is an episode of Pokemon where Brock is making rice balls by the river, but they figured that American kids just wouldn't know what those are, so they changed it to jelly donuts instead, despite the fact that they look nothing like jelly donuts. So Nolan kind of did something like that, but with the Odyssey, localized it in
Um,
entirely. But
in an extreme way, yes.
yeah, yeah,
It
more
like
more
in
than just like
every
a little
possible
bit
sense.
of like, oh, you're not gonna know what a rice ball is. Let's just call it a jelly donut. It's overall rather innocuous, right? It doesn't really
Yes.
change anything that's happening in the episode or in the scene. It's just we've changed the food they're eating and we're pretending that that's what that is, right? Um, but Nolan did something even more extreme, and we'll
He
get.
modernized
Yeah, he
it.
modernized it, but I think
He
Platoon was
modernized it.
saying that you can infer
Yeah.
that he modernized it based on a book called Odysseus in America, which if I've never read it, but if I understand it correctly, it's like comparing basically reading the Odyssey through a PTSD lens of veterans coming home from Vietnam, which is
Well, certainly
one
that's
way
what
you
his
can
movie
do
does.
it. Like that's what you can infer that or read into that when you look through the text, right? You can kind of see like there's like maybe a subtle metaphor about like oh yeah, he never made it home. It took him 20 years to get back to where he originally came from and where he started from after going to war. You can infer that maybe there's some kind of metaphor at work about the toll that war takes on men who go off to fight it, but it's
In the source
in the
material,
source
yeah.
material you can maybe infer like you can it's definitely not the entire point of the story.
Yeah.
And if it is there, it's incredibly subtle and it is surrounded by many, many, many other things that you would have to ignore to make this into an entire story just about PTSD and war trauma, right?
Yeah. Well, basically, I think I should just start with my thesis about the movie, like my interpretation, right? Because I've already sort of thrown shade at a lot of people's interpretations of the movie. As I mentioned at the beginning, like Barbie, this is a movie where everyone on every side of the cultural divide, because this is become, and I think not undeservedly, a very like culturally salient movie in terms of the culture war, right? And I don't think people are being unreasonable by looking at this movie in that light, right? But everyone on every side of this has very like contrasting and mutually exclusive interpretations of the movie. And I think fundamentally this is because this movie is a self-contradictory mess. It's not a work of subtle like 5D chess brilliance where like oh he's like using these tropes to trick us. It's like the movie's a Trojan horse. You're seeing a lot of that and it's driving me nuts. I think it's clear from what Nolan has said about the movie in public what he was trying to do and what the interpretation he wants people to walk away with. However, people are seeing whatever they want to see in the movie because the movie is a mess, which kind of makes it hard to talk about. And so I do have some sympathy for the people that have struggled to like talk about this movie because for everything you say about like an interpretation of events, you have to sort of acknowledge, yeah, but except for that thing that doesn't fit, right?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, this is a movie with a bunch of pieces that don't fit together. So he has taken the Odyssey and he's modernized it with the dialogue, with the morals and the ethics and the ethos and the attitudes towards, war and guilt and shame and all that sort of stuff. In that sense, it is a fundamentally modern liberal story. But also, it kind of purports to be set in ancient Greece. And there are some things that feel very ancient and pre modern, and those things stick out like a sore thumb and they don't fit anymore. Basically, Nolan has changed so much of the story that what he didn't change doesn't fit. What he left the same because it's a really integral or important or fun part of the original story doesn't fit anymore. For example, he got rid of the gods. The gods don't show up explicitly and have conversations with people or like interact with the characters in a sort of tangible way like they do in the source material. And he did that to sort of modernize it and sort of treat the story with like how a modern liberal materialist would look at a story about the gods. They say, and Nolan has said this himself. Oh, well, they interpreted the lightning as God speaking to them. So in my movie, I won't have Zeus speaking to them. I'll just have the lightning, basically. Right. So that's a very, very, very modern way of looking at an ancient story.
That's true, but
Um,
then he also doesn't have so because there is an interesting idea to that, right? Where like if you were to show the lightning and then show Odysseus interpreting, you know, what he sees through the thunder and the lightning, right, as a
yeah.
message from the gods.
Yes.
Well, okay, like I could maybe get on board with you doing that kind of revisionist version of it because that's a more that I mean it is a more modern take. I would
But at least
prefer
you
that
still
you
have
don't,
the
but
character
yeah,
interpreting it. Yeah.
yeah, you have the character interpreting it. You don't have this undertone of like snarky atheism in your main character to make
Yeah.
sure that modern atheist audiences aren't going to be off put by him doing these
Or
things, right? Like,
alienated.
or
Yeah.
alienated by him doing these. Yeah, like that. So he wants to do that, but then also deny the existence of it, right? Like, I mean, isn't the opening title card in a time of apparent magic? Like that's
Yes.
the opening title
Apparent
card, apparent
magic.
magic,
Yes.
and then we have Gale the snail turning people into pigs, and her sister into a crow, right? And we
Yeah.
have like an immortal sex goddess living on an island, who's like keeping Odysseus company through his opioid
And
addiction.
giant
And we
cyclopses
have
and all
giant
that sort of stuff.
cyclopses and giants
Yeah.
and like sweaty tube sock monsters that live in caves next to whirlpools. Like, what do you mean apparent magic, dude? Like, if those things are real, which the movie purports them to be, that's just fucking magic.
Yeah.
Like that yeah, apparent. Yeah, like the way that he puts the apparent in there is like very snarky, right? Very like a
Yes.
sort of like in a time of what these backwards fools and savages would have
Well,
believed to be magic.
yes, and so there's a fundamental contradiction at every level of analysis and at every turn, right? Like for example, the tagline of the movie is "Defy the Gods." And in some sense, that is partially a theme of the movie because Matt Damon says like, "Well, if the gods don't want me to return home and save my men, then I intend to defy the gods." But then the whole movie is started because or I guess the whole moral world of the movie is broken by him defying the laws of the gods, for example. And the movie is just full of these sort of messes of contradictions because he is modernizing the story consciously, intentionally, but then he hasn't accounted for all the things that need to be changed in order to make that work, to make that coherent. So in the end, essentially what you get is a movie that's a mess. And I think fundamentally that I disagree with everyone who has called this movie a great movie because a great movie definitionally has to be coherent. I think that's what makes a great work of art is that it's coherent. I think like the word art comes from like a root word that basically means the fitting of things together. The fact that all the tiny pieces in a work of art, in the case of a movie, the costumes, the performances, the sets, the editing, the music, that all those things cohere into one thing, which is the work, that's what a good work of art does. And this movie doesn't do that. It is not a good movie. There might be good parts of it, but they don't fit with the bad parts of it. And so even if you want to say, you could say there is something of a conservative message hidden in this movie. Hidden, maybe not the right word, buried in this movie, right? There's something kind of conservative that you could find in there. And I've seen people I admire talk about it and say like, "Oh, this movie is about this and this and this." And I go, "Yeah, that stuff's in there, but it's contradicted by all the stuff that flies in the face of it. And when you look at the thing as a whole, it's just a mess. I don't know how else to put it. That's what the movie is. It's like Barbie. This is Barbie is to Greta Gerwig as the Odyssey is to Nolan. It's a
Yeah.
sort of like uh, there are like deep, maybe you could even say spiritual or at least ideological contradictions happening in both of these people, and the resulting movie does not fit. It doesn't come together into a coherent whole. They both kind of feel like midlife crisis movies in that regard.
Yeah.
Maybe Barbie more so. I'll be
Maybe,
a
yeah.
little,
Barbie is definitely more of a midlife crisis movie, but
yeah.
this one is for sure. At the very least, it's tinged by his like the fact that he spent so much time in. I would assume it's probably tinged by the fact that he spent so much time interpreting and adapting Oppenheimer's own personal midlife crisis that now he's kind of like
We
ported that
talked about
over onto
we
John
talked
Odyssey.
about we talked about Oppenheimer. We didn't care for it really. We had a lot of criticisms of that movie. I sort of maintained that movie is kind of like a 6 out of 10 at best, right? But
Yeah.
there's a lot of good stuff in Oppenheimer. It is much more coherent than this movie.
Yes. Well,
Not
because
unequivocally.
it makes it fits the trappings of the story more, right? Like this
Yeah.
is not an Oppenheimer movie. The Odysseus fundamentally is not the same character. He does not have the same character as Oppenheimer, especially in the original in any of the source material that you read, even if you read Emily Wilson's feminist localization of it, right? He is a proud man. He is a warrior. He's a tactician. He's a sly trickster. He's a very like the man
My
of
dog.
twists and turns. From the beginning of Robert Fagels's translation, does him a great amount of justice. In fact, like I think one of the more accurate versions, true to the character that you are ever going to see, is George Clooney's from Oh Brother Where Art Thou, playing
Yeah.
Ulysses Everett.
Yeah.
Because he's a con man, he's smooth talking, he's got
Charismatic. He's
charismatic,
cunning.
he's cunning, but he's also very prideful and in some ways kind of like kind of silly.
Yeah.
Gets himself in trouble
Yeah.
by doing so, right? So I like that that is a unironically or a very strangely even, right? Like it is a more accurate adaptation of the source material, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with Greeks or the ancients or anything like that. Like you've kept the soul of it alive far better than
Brother, where
Nolan
art
did
thou? Yeah.
in Oh Brother Where Art Thou. Yeah. I
Absolutely.
th-
That's my that okay, we'll talk about it more as we get into all the finer details, but that's my basic thesis for this movie is that there are a lot of things you could point to say that this movie is actually secretly conservative or secretly based or secretly liberal or secretly all this and that and the other thing. But fundamentally all the pieces of this movie do not fit together. It's a mess. And like that is my fundamental critique of the movie. And I don't think you can really argue. I've seen people try to argue that all these things are coherent, and we'll talk about them. But that's my general thesis. Hugh, what do you think of the Odyssey? You haven't given your take on it on the
I have
internet
not
yet.
yet. Real
What's your
quick,
what's the
let me
broad
allow me
strokes?
to respond to Ephraim Winslow here in the chat, who says, "Shout out to," and I'm gonna add here, Menelaus Pappy O'Daniel from Oh Brother Where Art Thou. That is his full Christian name, for inspiring me to make more liberal use of the word cracker as a white guy. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? You dumb cracker, saying it a bunch of. He's so good. That movie. That movie rocks. That movie is so fucking good. I'm so glad I rewatched it before going into this, because at least that means that I had a good time with some Odyssey material before hitting this movie. I described this to you, Jamie, after pretty much immediately after leaving the theater, as if you would imagine that there is an all-time great football coach who, let's say, invented one of the most cunning trick plays of all time. He won several Super Bowls off of this trick, the back of this trick play. He's deeply admired in the community of sports fans for having done so and sort of changing the way the game is played and being incredibly tactful and crafty about it. And so you go to see the biopic made of this great coach, and that actor playing the great coach spends the whole movie pissing and moaning about how awful it was that his trick play won him so many great victories, how it ruined the purity of the game, and how sad he is that he ever did so and had the idea to do it. And then he at the end he passes the torch to his son, having not really taught him anything, and he goes off on boomer cruises with his wife. That's
Yeah.
how I felt watching this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It blew my mind how just I think that Chinese girl who interviewed Nolan about this, she brought up a really great point in a way, and you could tell that she wasn't particularly thrilled with the way the movie works, right? But the movie is an apology for greatness, and I don't like that. The thing that I love about the Iliad, and especially Robert Fagles' Iliads and Odyssey translations, are that he really revels in the victories. He revels in the glory of it. He's giving you, you can read whatever sorts of regret that you want into it, right? Achilles losing his best friend in Patroclus, and Odysseus being stranded for 20 years out, but he's reveling in their triumphs and their victories as much as he is in the tragedy of it. It's complex and interesting, and just there's so many flavors active in that work. And so then to come in and see it be so bland and gray and sad, and just an apology the entire time for this incredible story, that and not even just an apology for this story, but essentially saying that this is the reason that an entire civilization crumbled to the ground, right? That an entire golden age ended because the atomic bomb went off, right? Like,
Yeah.
what a wild thing to do with this source material. I saw some comments in the chat about, what, you don't like the Viking longships? Uh, well, no, not particularly. I was
No, I
kind
don't.
of looking forward to. I love trireme design. I think those are so cool. I played a lot of Age of Empires as a kid, and I love the way that those boats look. Why couldn't we do that? Why, like Troy did it. Troy did it a lot. There were a lot of them. Actually, there's a scene in Troy of all the boats going across the Aegean Sea that I thought looked like it could have just come straight out of a high def rendering of Age of Empires, which I was just like, yeah, that works for me, man. I'm down for it, right? Why do we have a Viking longship here? Oh, well, because that doesn't matter, but also the composer isn't going to be allowed to use orchestral music because Greeks wouldn't have access to orchestras.
Yeah. So
Cool.
let's break that down, right? Because I think fundamentally what's happening here is that Nolan has a perverse relationship with authenticity and realism. I think what you could say about many of his movies is that he doesn't like artifice, right? He'll use CGI, especially on the big Batman movies, but he's always trying to do as little as he can, right? He's always trying to do things for real anytime he can help it, right? Lighting is always rather naturalistic in his movies. He doesn't typically have unmotivated lighting. Dialogue is sort of very real. It's not the dialogue isn't very stylized. It's not like he's never going to do anything Shakespearean really ever. He likes when people speak plainly. He likes when the camera is at eye level. Everything about him is trying to go for like what he might call, I think he has called actually, an enhanced naturalism, right?
I'm gonna just jump in here real quick with two things. Number one, we missed a super chat from Markinen. Apologies. Thank you very much for the super chat. Says, "Hey guys, love the show. Appreciate that EFAP tries to focus on the objective quality of the media covered, but it's always great, Cap, when you bring up the ideology that these works are steeped in. EFAP act as if ideology is not core to these works." Thank you very much. We certainly
I
appreciate
appreciate
that.
that. I think because this has come up in the last couple times I've been on, because we talked about Supergirl and we talked about the Odyssey, And I've tried to make the point that, at least to defend people talking about it, like that they're not crazy for noticing that the decisions, like the casting in the Odyssey, is obviously ideological. Now, that doesn't have to be what anyone focuses on individually. I know that they, especially like Fringy, they really like to just focus on the story in the movie for what it is, right? They don't really want to get political about it. They just want to talk about the story, and that's, it's fine. And more power to them. And I like to do that sometimes too. But I do think, sometimes it's the only way to understand why a thing is
It's
happening
yeah,
in a
well, and I
movie.
think it's also a very important part of understanding why this is so controversial of a film, right? Because if
Yes.
you sit
Yeah,
there
yeah.
and go like, if you just look at the story, you could it's incongruent. It's not like, and if you try to remove adaptation and everything from it, right? It's incongruent. It's not particularly strong in any theme. It's not really all that well made of a movie, guys. I'm sorry to say, it does not blow my mind the way it does the normies who see this shit in the theater and go like, "Whoa, IMAX! Whoa!" Like the Cyclops looks okay. Like, I'm not gonna say I didn't particularly think it looked all that great, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I wasn't blown away by it. The
There are
Hallmark.
aspects of the movie that I do not begrudge people for thinking look really awesome or
There are some
interesting,
of them, but I'm like I
but
just like
overall, I agree with you.
overall I'm just like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, like the Cyclops is cool. Yeah, if I'm being honest, I feel like the Hallmark Cyclops from the Armand Assante Odyssey looks better, but that's opinion, right? Sure.
Yeah.
But you have taken a foundational story of the Western canon. This is foundational to our civilization. This is one of the classics that has come down for us, and it's almost like the five classics in Chinese culture, right? Like this is our one of our oldest stories, and you have subverted it into something that is decidedly not the message of it. And it is the version that many more people, because people don't read as much anymore and they don't seek these things out, right? This is the version that people are going to think of when other people mention the Odyssey, right? What are you doing if you crucify the heroes like this and make them, and rather like crucify the heroes of that story, crucify the ideals of what make that story so foundational and strong. What are you?
There's a
What?
reason that
Why?
this
Why?
that this
Yeah,
story has lasted for, thousands of years, and this movie will not, right, fundamentally. And what annoys me, I'm gonna bring up something very specifically, right? Because some people will say, actually, Virgil's Aeneid has been more influential on Western civilization than the Odyssey. We've been interacting with it more. More of our great Western literature has referenced Virgil than Homer, etc. And, the Aeneid takes a sort of like oppositional view of the events of this period. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
like part of what Nolan did in sort of like fundamentally changing the relationship between Odysseus and what he does for his movie is to borrow from the Aeneid, which is much more critical of,
yeah. Well,
the
because the
Trojan
Aeneid is
horse.
written from the perspective of the refugee Trojans who
Yes.
are legendarily found Rome, right?
Exactly. So, but see, so they'll say, actually, the Aeneid is more important to Western civilization. And like, are you surprised that in our modern Western world that someone takes a dim view of, Odysseus and what he does, considering we're so more steeped in the Aeneid than the Odyssey? And I would say, well, then adapt the Aeneid, man. This is this is
Well,
you're
we don't want to
calling it
do
the
that though, because if we adapt the Aeneid is incredibly pro Empire.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's the thing as well. There's layers to it, but basically, like, yes, I do expect a movie called The Odyssey to tell the story of the Odyssey. And see, the part of the problem is, I think what people are getting wrong here is that most people, first of all, most people nowadays have not read either. Unfortunately, that is not a good thing for our culture, right? And I agree with you that most people that watch this movie that caused it to make $1 billion at the box office are not going to go on to read the original. Some will, and that's good. It's good for this some that are going to be more interested in the classics now because of this movie. but most won't, right? So most people's interpretation of the Odyssey will come entirely from this movie, and maybe the few things they hear from critics who say, actually, it was different. Mostly, this is going to taint people's understanding of what the Odyssey is for like one generation, I would say. And like I don't think that's good.
Yeah.
And so the other thing is I would say is that, as a sort of like modern Western people, right? I don't think, because I saw Jonathan Pajot. Jonathan Pajot is a like sort of cultural commentator among many other things that I like and admire in many respects. He talks a lot
Yeah.
about symbolism and he's a very smart guy. But he made a post that really annoyed me that was along these lines. Like, are you really surprised that the movie takes a dim view of the Trojan horse and all that because, our tradition is so steeped in the Aeneid? My thought was like, I don't think modern people are really holding on to like blood guilt from that conflict. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I really think the modern person who likes the classics, would like the Odyssey and the Aeneid and find them both interesting and sort of identify both with the sort of ancestors of our civilization. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. This is maybe controversial, but I don't know. If I see any American who takes one side exclusively in the Civil War, when thinking back on it, I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, how can you not see yourself on both sides? You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. That sort of thing gets under my skin because it's like, oh, I guess we're supposed to be fine with completely bastardizing the Odyssey because the Aeneid is more important or
Yeah, but
something.
you
It's like
remember
I don't
also
think
like
that's
who do we
true.
appeal to? Who do these same and this is Jonathan Pajot, so this is not really the point to be made, I suppose. But like who do these same people who I assume there's a bunch of leftists jumping on that argument as well, right? Oh yeah, the Aeneid. It's more based on the Aeneid because it's really that's actually more foundational to our civilization than the Odyssey or the Iliad. But none of them would I would wager none of them would put Rome as a foundation. If they appeal to anything in our democratic society, they're going to appeal to the Greeks and to Athens, right? Which that's pretty much where these two came out of, the Odyssey
Yeah.
and the Iliad. So,
I do like so I don't basically I guess what I want to get at here is that I don't take this like very I don't think the most accurate way of interpreting this is that this movie is just specifically taking a dim view of the Odyssey but really has respect for the rest of Western civilization. It's like no, this movie I think that Chinese interviewer had it right because ultimately Nolan agreed with her, by the way, that he feels he needs to apologize for greatness. He read the Odyssey and saw his act of deception with the Trojan horse, and he cringed and he went, ugh, I don't like that, that makes me uncomfy. You know what I mean? This
yeah.
is a modernist sort of like liberalization of the story that takes a very dim view of the West in particular and of the values that, were much more common in these stories. And I just fundamentally I can't get on board with the idea that making Odysseus guilt-ridden in a way that's totally anachronistic and doesn't make any sense for someone to be living in that time period and have the attitudes he has in this movie. But setting that aside, like taking that character and making him extremely guilt-ridden, like he broke the world for like playing a trick that worked in war in ancient Greece, as like this is not a conservative move, right? This is not a right-wing move. This is not a pro-Western move to take a character like this and make him into a guy that regrets what he did in the Vietnam War. I just don't think I don't see this, especially what especially annoys me is when people say that like this movie is fundamentally like a Christianization of
Oh
the
well,
Odyssey.
she did ask that, right? That same
She
interviewer
did ask that, but I think,
asked
well,
that.
I mean, but what does she know? I'm just saying, I've seen a lot of people say that this is fundamentally like, oh, this is good and this is conservative and based or whatever, because we're taking a more Christian view. Because obviously, the original story is sort of like ancient Greek pagan, and many of its values are things that will feel very foreign and alien to us now. Many of them will feel perfectly like natural and relatable. We'll read the Odyssey, the Iliad, and all that sort of stuff, and see some things that are timeless and true about humanity. And then there are some things we'll see and we'll go, Jesus Christ, we don't do that anymore. You know, there's going to be a mix of both. And the idea that we would just go, see, Xenia, which was in the original something like a law governing hospitality that extended both for, the host and the guest, is now fundamentally a weird, warped
Some
version
warped
of the
version of the
golden
golden
wheel.
rule that
The golden rule,
applies
yeah.
universally. Yeah.
Except for when it doesn't, because the movie's is a contradictory mess. I don't know. I don't find the rewriting of the past a
Well,
very
applies to the actions
conservative
of men,
move.
obviously, right? Because
Yeah.
they do. So one of the things that this movie does, that I think it rubbed me the wrong way. I don't like this, right? Is that the Trojan horse in war, a tactical move in wartime is viewed as violating hospitality, right? Playing a trick is
It
viewed
just
as
doesn't make any fucking
violating the
sense.
golden
You're in a
rule on the
war.
battlefield.
The
Like,
war has already started.
the war has
This is
started, right? And like the golden rule even now, right? I don't know that there's a reasonable person alive who would insist that the golden rule means you shouldn't try to win in a conflict of life or death. Right? Like I
yeah.
don't think I don't think there's a reasonable person who would make that who would take that stance, right? But it obviously the golden rule applies to Odysseus, and it broke the world when he decided not to follow it. But when Helen, which the movie heavily insinuates, she decided to run away from her potentially loveless or abusive husband, maybe. When
Maybe.
she does that, right? That's not a violation of Zeus's law. That is just an excuse for Menelaus's economic or Agamemnon's
Yeah.
economic motivations for the war. And so this is something that and Troy, I noticed Troy did this too, and I didn't particularly like it in Troy, but I think it's better executed there than it is here. Right? Is even in Troy, Helen and her beauty and her running off, right, is presented as sort of like secondary to his general motivation. He's in it for imperialism in Troy, and in Nolan's version, it's an even more Marxist interpretation, right? It's like it's all economics that's driving his motivation. And in the source material, they they are there for their honor, the honor of their society. Like those things are also, I'm sure, on their minds, right? But they're also on the front lines. Agamemnon and Menelaus are on the front lines fighting, and they are great warriors too. This is not a time when, and Troy did this a little bit, right, where it's like, oh, the soldiers do the fighting, all you kings just chill and sit in the back, and it's like, again, sort of like a modern version of like
Yes.
warfare,
Yes.
right? Which I was like, I mean, it's working better here than it is in the Odyssey for sure, right? But like, but you know, they
Yeah.
both do that, and that drove me nuts, right? Where I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
man, like, can we not? Like, can we just have these guys? I want them to be cool. I want them to be warriors. I want them
Yeah.
like that. I want them to be great heroes and fighters. That's what they were.
Yeah.
Even to the ancients who were reading these and listening to these. That's what they
And
were.
it's not like the original story doesn't give them flaws or interesting things we can judge them for. I want to see those adapted faithfully too. Fundamentally, I it, it's full of contradictions because in some ways we are totally modernizing the story, in which case you could point to all the visual anachronisms and the dialogue anachronisms and say, we're Nolan is clearly trying to signal to us not to care about whether this is an actual faithful retelling of any sort of story from ancient Greece, hence the Viking longships, hence the armor, hence the dialogue, etc. But then Nolan in interviews is like, well, technically the Batman Darth Vader suit could be possible because they did have black and bronze. It's like, dude, why are you even doing this? But fundamentally, I can't see it as an admirable move to sort of like flatten the past in this way, you know? Unless if you change the name of the story and change the setting entirely, that's different. right?
Yeah.
But like flattening the past and like dragging it down to the present, because fundamentally Nolan believes that modern audiences can't find it relatable if he doesn't. In that interview with the Chinese person, the only person to ever ask him any interesting questions, basically, she says, do you feel like, why do Western directors feel like they need to apologize for greatness? And then he kind of gave this long, circuitous answer that eventually arrived at, well, you see, we have to apologize for greatness, or else the modern audience, who's grown up in a liberal world where we all believe that human beings are equal, will not accept that greatness. And so you have to apologize for it. And now, there's two things about that. One, I don't think that's even true. I think the popularity of superhero movies, which are almost entirely about great men who are exceptional, um, kind of belies the argument that fundamentally modern audiences can't accept great or
We
exceptional
don't even have to
characters.
do this with movie audiences, man. Like, look at sports, like live sports
Yes,
ratings.
yes,
We
yeah,
love watching exceptional people do
yes.
great things and put themselves above the rest, right?
And we
Like,
actually kind of like it when they're unapologetic about it.
yeah.
Sorry,
You remember
people.
Kobe? You know how fucking cool Kobe Bryant was when he would
Yeah,
just like dog people on the court and like talk smack because he knew he was better, right? We
yeah.
kind of like that. We kind of like it when people
More than
have that.
kind of.
Yeah,
Sometimes people, like, oh, that's just, it's unbecoming, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, people find it really captivating, right?
yeah.
But
Spider-Man just outdid your movie in 6 days, Chris.
that is true. But then the number two is that I think Nolan is passing the buck here. I do not believe for a second that Nolan secretly, if it weren't for modern liberal audiences who expect him to apologize for it, just wants to talk about unapologetically great men and tell stories about them. Oh, but he has to apologize for it just because modern audiences, they won't accept it otherwise. It's like, just admit that that's what you believe, because it's so obvious that's what you believe. Nolan is a series of contradictions. One of them is that he clearly is fascinated by stories of great men, right? Exceptional men, important men who do exceptional things and change the history of the world and of cities and all that sort of stuff, right? Oppenheimer, Batman, all these people, Odysseus, he's clearly interested in that, right? But because he himself is a liberal and he himself believes that, oh, human beings, we're all equal, right? He kind of feels bad about it. It's not the audience that won't accept it, he won't accept it, which is why every single one of his movies, to one degree or another, has a sort of brooding, shame-filled, guilt-ridden main character to varying degrees, and I think it's gotten worse. Like the Oppenheimer one is probably the best story to explore this
Yeah,
for
that
in
is
Nolan,
for
right?
sure the best way to do that. If
But
that's the
someone
story you're
mentioned,
interested in telling, you tell that story. Right now, I'd like so you've mentioned this, and I saw somebody in chat mention this too. Right, it's like if he was asked to make the Dark Knight trilogy again today, he would 1,000% make Batman a self-flagellating, apologetic, like reluctant vigilante, rather than someone who, like, Batman Begins is not like this. The hero in Batman Begins is
no,
not like this, and in Dark Knight
he
Rises or Dark
he's
Knight,
kind
he's
of
not like this.
he's not a happy-go-lucky guy, right? Because he's had a tragic upbringing, and he takes what he does very seriously. But if Nolan did Batman today, I think fundamentally the story would be that by becoming a vigilante in the first place, he has broken the world.
They did
That's
kind of do a
essential.
little bit of that in the Dark Knight, right, where they sort of lay the blame at the feet of Batman for
Well, it's
creating the Joker.
the question is raised, but I don't think the movie actually comes down on the point that actually the Joker is his fault.
Yeah,
The question is raised, like, is it your fault? And I don't think the movie says yes. I
yeah.
really don't.
People are saying the Dark Knight Rises is kind of like that, though.
Yeah, and that
Yeah,
one
yeah. I
fucking
haven't.
blows.
That one sucks. I haven't seen that one in a long time, but that one fucking sucks.
Yes. Yes, and I think that's probably part of it. But like fundamentally, yeah, like if he made it today, that would 100% be the story that like, yeah, sure, Gotham had problems, but really everything spiraled out of control once he became Batman. And like he would make that movie, assuming all these other Batman movies didn't exist, the other Nolan Batman movies. He would make that movie and people would like the spectacle and be like, "Oh, cool, yeah, Batman." and only a few people will be like, why did we make Batman someone who apologizes for being Batman? I don't want that, really. And it's not like there isn't like some like crumbs of that sort of idea in Batman. And he has to deal with the fact that, some of the people who like rise to meet him are even crazier than the mobsters that he starts with. But I think fundamentally the way he would handle it now is to definitively say that like I broke I did this by becoming a vigilante in the first place, right? That I broke the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, but like
Yeah.
cuz that's essentially God, it just pisses me off. John Odyssey in this movie, I think what really annoys me about it is like there are parts of the story that aren't modern because the whole thing isn't modern. Like Agamemnon is kind of like a caricature of an evil ancient like tyrant, right? Who like sacrifices his own child for favorable wins, right? That is not a modern move. Even our modern villains don't usually do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Couple
Well,
that with like John Leguizamo throwing a puppy off of a cliff very casually, right? Like that's a very ancient thing. That's a thing they did in the past. We don't really do that anymore, right? But so there are things about this world that are like at least nominally similar to how they are in the source material. But then Nolan inserts himself or the same protagonist that he is interested in all of his movies into this world, and his basic attitude seems to be like, if I were there, I would have been different. And that drives me up a wall. That really does. That feels so arrogant to me. Like, if I were there in this time, I would recognize that the war was actually a bad thing, and I
and it
wouldn't
was,
want to
yeah.
do it, but I would do it anyway because I'm not a coward, right? But I would be different. I would be built different. I would have realized that the sacking of Troy was wrong because it got innocent people killed, actually.
Yeah, sure. Jesus fucking Christ, man. Like, yeah, that is the
Oh,
sort of
we have a
like,
great super chat
go ahead. Yeah,
from
yeah.
Mark Conan. Apologizing for great men reminds me of Ripley's Napoleon. I'm so glad you said that because I totally agree. A deconstruction that strips away romantic myth to expose the petty, awkward, and destructive man behind the legend. Top result on Google, citing Reddit. Yeah, well, the fact that all AIs are basically referencing Reddit all the time is a disaster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. I
That's why I
totally agree, and
use
that's
Grok.
basically the interpretation of Ridley Scott's Napoleon is that like we stripped away what made him great, such that the story isn't really believable anymore. Like fundamentally, one of the things I remember about Ridley Scott's Napoleon is that like he gives a speech to those guys, and he's at the very end after he's been in exile, and where he's going to like they're going to take him back, and then they're going to go to Paris and all that sort of stuff like that. And he gives his little speech to them, and it's not rousing, and it's not charismatic, and it's like why would they follow him? I don't believe they would follow this guy. You've depicted him as such like a petty, like gross child, essentially, even though he's way older than the character is supposed to be by like 20 years. I don't believe this anymore. I don't believe these events. I don't believe that this is one of the smartest military men in history, et cetera, right? Because Napoleon actually was a very charismatic guy, or else he wouldn't have been emperor, right? Like, yeah, you've broken the realism by like dragging him down this
It's
much.
the
And the
chain. Like,
same
there's
thing.
there's a great chain you can trace it back to, right? Like, trace it back through, of these great men throughout history. Right? Napoleon was inspired by Caesar, was inspired by Alexander, was inspired by Achilles. Right?
Yeah,
Like and that might be a simplification, I'm sure, because I know Napoleon was also super inspired by Hannibal Barca, another great man who has, when they make the movie about him, I'm sure he's gonna be a black guy that because he was from Africa. Let's oh, he lived in northern Africa during the golden age of the rise of Rome, the Roman Republic. Oh boy, wonder what that could be.
Oh,
Um,
I'm so glad you mentioned that really quick because when people talk about the cast, they love to go like, well, look how close Greece is to Africa. You think some of the characters in the
Hold on, wait,
Odyssey
wait, wait.
weren't
Shall we
black?
consult the map? I think I have it. It's in the chat here. Let me find it real quick. I know I sent it to you.
You find that,
I
but
will.
they love to pretend that that the fact like that Northern Africa is sub-Saharan Africa. They love to pretend it's the exact same thing because that means more black people in the story, and that's all they really care about.
Yeah, of course it is. Well, because
I,
that's
I
the
do
only
want
way
to
that you
start.
qualify for Oscars. But go ahead while I look for this. Go ahead and continue.
Let's talk about that, right? Because many people pointed out like, oh, Nolan probably only did this diverse casting thing, which is not something he didn't do for Oppenheimer, by the way, notably, like because he's trying to qualify for Oscars, and it's like, no, I think people criticized Oppenheimer for not being diverse and, for example, not having enough female characters, and he actually took it to heart because he's just a liberal. And like that is the Occam's razor here, right? Like the simple version of like why he made a lot of these decisions is because he just believes in them. Not that he like, oh well, he just had to qualify for the Oscars. Like, first of all, the qualifications for the Oscars, like you can meet them behind the scenes. You do not need to meet them entirely based on the cast on screen, right? And clearly, like with Oppenheimer, I don't know when they changed the rules. Anyway, the point is, I think the simple answer here is that he just thought it was a good thing that the cast was now way more diverse. And that is an ideological decision because this came up on the EFAP when Lil Platoon said like when he mentioned the race blind casting, and I said like, oh, is that what we're calling it? This is not race blind casting. This is not. This is race obsessed casting. The idea that Nolan would, because everyone, this is what everyone's going to do. They're going to say, oh, well, like, no, he was just hiring the best actor for the job. Like, really? Travis Scott was the best person you could find for the Bard? Yeah, fucking right.
So
All right, he
at
sucks in the movie.
yeah,
He's
the map
bad. He gives a bad performance. He is not a convincing he's not a convincing poet. He is not a convincing bard at all.
the map we can consult the map here on screen, and I'm the reason that there's a big yellow cross out there in there and it replaced by 1,000 is because when I made this originally I underestimated how fucking huge the Sahara Desert is. Point being, the only way that it could possibly have happened, really, is if you come up through what is now Sudan up the Nile and make that 1,000-mile trip up the river. That's not a common thing to do. I'm sure people did it. Like, yeah, they're throughout history, incredibly rare that anybody would have made that trip.
Yeah.
That's the long and short of it, right? Like most of
Yeah.
that area of northern Africa was colonized by seafaring Greeks, what we
I
would
think
know as Greeks and
well,
Middle
there's
East.
also there's also like a Korean and an Indian in the movie. So I think what people
That
need
is
to
true.
do is stop pretending that this is historically accurate because it's not. And you look ridiculous trying to pretend that it is. And just accept that this is one of the many decisions that is making no attempt to even feign historical accuracy, right? With the American accents and blah 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 blah. So why did he do it? I think partly he heard all the criticisms of his previous movies, but also I think he put such a diverse cast in this movie because he genuinely believes it's good. And that is like a fundamentally liberal like pet issue, right? And it does I will be honest, I think the the diverse cast itself is a problem in a way that like this maybe this is a hot take. If the cast was entirely black people, it would actually solve this problem in a way. I'm serious.
but no, I get you. I know what you're
I
saying.
think
Yeah.
fundamentally the diverse cast is a problem in and of itself because I think what's motivating it here because there's Travis Scott is not the best actor for the Bard. That's just the most egregious example because I think he's just genuinely bad in the movie because he's just not a good actor and he's horribly miscast for the part he's supposed to be playing and he's only there because Nolan wants to do the white boomer thing of going, "Oh, actually rap is a lot like the spoken oral poetry traditions of ancient Greece." No, it isn't. No, it isn't. And I think Nolan knows that, which is what is really annoying. I think he knows it isn't, but he just wants liberal good boy points. He's doing a lot of this for liberal good boy points, right? And fundamentally, what this seems to be motivated by, as far as I'm concerned, is a desire to implicitly recast all of our history as having been diverse this whole time, right? Because if it was diverse the whole time, then people won't object to the fact that population demographics are radically shifting in every major Western country in the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like anytime the BBC makes anything about British history, right? It's like they can't help themselves. And so the question I would say, if you're going to get into arguments on the internet about this sort of race obsessed, like diverse casting, you need to force people out of the like, oh, why can't directors do it? Like, what's so wrong with it? And like the question is, why are you obsessed with doing it? You're obsessed with doing it all the time. I want you to just say out loud why you're obsessed with doing it, but they won't because it's not a good look.
Yeah, of
I
course
just,
not. And like
no, Drives me nuts.
to just continue briefly before I take the map off screen here, right? This very scientific chart that I produced in my spare
Yes.
time, right? Um,
Yeah.
this, but we're not allowed to use a fucking orchestra because that would have been too crazy.
It's funny. I didn't know this until Platoon pointed it out that orchestra is a
Is a
Greek
Greek
word.
word, yeah,
That's pretty
comes from the
funny.
word. Yeah,
You know
no,
what?
yeah,
And it's what's really strange about the like God, dude. This is just another great example. Let's talk about the music briefly. So the music is like fundamentally composed of like drums, like gongs, and like Greek flutes. And so you think, okay, that's the main gist of it. Never mind that they're not playing like what they probably would have played in ancient Greece. They're doing very modern movie score stuff with those instruments. But fine, at least they're using those instruments, right? That could lend some degree of authenticity, right? But also there's like synth bass hits and like 808 drums and things like that. And we're like chopping and screwing and like doing things to manipulate the sound of the gongs that don't sound anything really like gongs anymore. They just sound kind of like weird alien synth noises. And okay, well that's actually kind of more distracting and more non-immersive than just having like a John Williams orchestra to me.
yeah,
First of all, the thing about the orchestra, right, with its violins and cellos and horns and all that stuff. Obviously, they didn't have those things in ancient Greece. I can see a version of this movie being really successful where they really only use instruments that they had available at the time, and because there is actually a lot of research into like what their musical scales and tonal systems sounded like and the kind of melodies they had. We have a lot of that information, believe it or not, because they wrote a lot of stuff down. If we really adhered to that, I would like it. If they had like a John Williams style orchestral classical score, I would like that too. Why? Because that sort of score is that is the tradition that we can go back through history and arrive at ancient Greece with. You know what I mean? It's evolved
yeah.
so much since then, but that does actually feel like the evolution and continuation of our sort of cultural tradition in general. And so like eschewing that because you don't want to do what a lot of older movies did, fine. But like you don't get to claim it's all for authenticity if you're going to include synth elements.
Yeah. Now
You know what I
this
mean?
is an interesting. So there's a couple of great comments that I want to talk about real quick. So Mr. Redhead just dropped that Howard Shore would have done a fantastic score for this.
Yeah.
Rereading the book, I was struck by how many times the imagery described by Robert Fagles in his version went practically like one for one with what I remember from the Silmarillion, right? Like when Odysseus arrives at the Phaeacians and they are described as like these people who are closer to the gods than the average Greeks. I'm like, yeah, that's Numenor. That's the Numenorians. Like, make it look like Minas fucking Tirith, dude. Like, that would be so cool. Like, Minas Tirith, of course, they're not even in the movie, right? But, like, let's do something like that, right? Howard Shore would have been a fantastic choice for this. I've seen some other comments, too, about, like, like, let's cast some Greeks in this movie. Yeah, I don't really, that doesn't go one way or the other for me. Honestly, I don't really care all that much about seeing Greeks on screen, although it would have been really funny to, like, back in the day, have the dad from My Big Fat Greek Wedding playing Odysseus. I think that could have been hysterical.
Here's how I think about it. Okay, in terms of the casting, I think for me, ideal world, we go full like apocalypto here.
That would be
Where
fucking
we
awesome. I would
where
say,
we
yeah.
only get people that look like what to the best of our knowledge and historical information look like they could have been ancient Greece, and everyone looks like they belong in ancient Greece or they look like they're Trojan based on all the information we have from the tradition, from the original sources. All the characters whose appearance is described in the story are portrayed by people who look like that. And ideally, maybe they speak in our best approximation of the original Greek with subtitles. Like that would be like the most
that would be
fully
the coolest.
immersive,
Yeah.
coolest version as far as I'm concerned. Now, we
One
can
step down from that would be
yeah.
something like the Northmen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Where they speak in English, but with it's sort of like with Greek accents or something like that. But still, the cast feels homogenous. They all feel believably Greek, etc. And we can take various steps down that would still be acceptable, right? One common thing that we used to do a lot in movies is, especially about the past, everyone would speak in as old a British accent as still makes sense to modern listeners, right? And so they speak in a sort of high, the King's English type thing, and we get a lot of English actors, but nonetheless, everyone feels coherent. The people that are related look like they would be related, etc. And you can take various steps down through all of these things to varying levels that like I would still find acceptable or good. But I think that ideal is still something closer to like Apocalypto or the Northman for me, right? That's what I would really
yeah.
like to see. And however,
Nicole Kidman's plastic surgery face notwithstanding,
no,
something
yes,
along
because
those
that
lines. Yeah, and
because
so this is one of the things too, like because watching when I watched The Northman, I was like, kind of. I loved the way that he shot that, the way that that he created those worlds, right? And then I went and read or reread the Robert Fagle's Iliad, and I was like, I swear a Robert Eggers Iliad would
slap.
absolutely slap. That would be
Yeah.
so good.
He might he might make it a little grim dark for my taste because
It might
that's
be,
his
yeah,
taste.
yeah. He's,
But
but I could see him doing a
except for
pretty
the
damn
fact
good job.
except for the fact that he can't really or doesn't really seem to care about plastic surgery face, he has a really great sense of attention to detail for historical authenticity, probably the best working today. So yeah, I can totally understand people who'd want that. I think this is
Okay,
in reference
Wasserman's
one.
making a little face in the chat here, real quick, because she says Anya Taylor Joy is so authentic Slavic woman. It's not that I'm saying that they have to be super authentic. She's skinny, pale, and blonde, and that's what us Americans associate with Slavic
Well,
women in
yeah, so,
general,
like, it's not
right?
like that movie is perfect. It's not
Yeah.
like like, perfectly adhering to the idea that, like, everyone in the Northman looks like they're actually Norse or whatever. Like, that's a sort of ideal maybe. For me, I would like to aim for that if possible, but there are other factors, in terms of, like, the marketability of actors and all that sort of stuff, right? You gotta get people to see the movie. The Northman, didn't actually do super well at the box office, by the way.
Yeah,
So,
no, so maybe
like
that's probably that could have been one of the reasons why they didn't go
you know,
for it.
they're like, yeah, I think in a perfect world, if the point is me being immersed in the historical time period, I want it to feel as authentic and realistic as possible. I want to be transported to ancient Greece in a movie. That sounds great. I don't really want modern values or modern sensibilities and blah, 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 or modern demographics being superimposed onto ancient Greece. That's just not something I'm interested in, right? And so there are different levels between what I would say is ideal and what we got in this movie. We'll return to this movie in a second. Wasserman said something to the effect of, or someone did. Who said it? It was Quantum Ranger Power. He said, "You mean actually be creative and brave in the modern Hollywood studio system?" And this is a point I want to make. I've made it before, but what is so frustrating about Nolan's movie is that no one had more clout in the ability to do this movie right if he wanted to than
Exactly.
Christopher
Yes.
Nolan.
This is somebody mentioned that. I think it was it Quantum Ranger Power also mentioned that, right? Like it's just like there was nobody better positioned than Christopher Nolan to take that risk, right? Because since The Dark Knight, at least, maybe even prior to that, this guy has had a blank check to do anything he wants. Any
Yeah.
movie he wants to
He
make,
gets
he gets to
20%
make
of
it.
he gets 20% of the gross profits of every movie he makes, essentially, because they want his movies that bad. So after the theater takes its cut, after IMAX takes its cut, blah blah blah, Nolan is getting 20% of what is left, right? $20
That's
million up
yep.
front, and 20% of this is what was reported. So like no one has had no one has more of a, whether it's earned or not, a like a reputation with modern audiences as being one of the better directors working today, reliably good, makes movies that feel big and spectacle, all that sort of fun
And
stuff.
that make $1 billion, man. He made a
Yeah.
biopic about Oppenheimer that made $1 billion. Like, he can do anything he wants. If he
Yes.
wanted to make a heroic, closer to accurate, right, historical sword and sandals adaptation of the Odyssey, nobody would have stood in his way. They would have just said, "Yeah, go for it. How much do you need?"
Yeah, Dave, thanks for the correction. Gross profit, not what I meant to say. But yes, he is getting 20% of the after the exhibitor takes their cuts, Nolan gets 20% of the back end on this movie. Right? And so but the larger point being that like no one is in a better position to make the most interesting, most accurate version of this movie that takes actually a lot of creative risks than Nolan. Nolan
Yeah.
could have done that if he wanted to.
What
And
he
clearly
wanted
he
to do was this. He wanted to make a
yes.
drab, like he wanted a drab, colorless, skeptical version of this story.
And diverse, right? Like he did not do this because he needed to,
Yeah.
right? He did not do the diverse cast because he just had to appeal to certain demographics. Like Oppenheimer didn't do that.
Yeah.
He didn't need to do that at all. He wanted to because fundamentally he thinks it's good that this story is like represents everyone, because that's the modern move is that the West's history belongs to everyone and everyone else's history belongs to them exclusively.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of that, and I don't like what this movie represents in that regard. And I am unwilling to do what many sort of people who would oppose that message have done in response to this movie, which is overlook it because, oh, ultimately it's about family or whatever.
It's about family. It's about apologizing for
Here's something I've
ending,
noticed.
tearing down
Like,
the Bronze Age.
here's something I've noticed, right? And this happens a lot with a lot of people on the right. I'm going to call out Ben Shapiro specifically because I watched his really terrible review of the movie. He's not the only one to do this, but there are many people who do this. But what I've noticed is that there are people who are perfectly willing or perfectly capable of noticing ideology motivating decisions in this movie, but there's kind of a spectrum of which ones they're able to notice, right? So when it comes to like the trans stuff, right, with the fact that this movie casts Elliot Page as a man, etc., and is an integral part of the story and everything that says about diversity and representation, blah blah blah. They notice that and they go like, oh, I don't like that. Even Ben Shapiro was like, yeah, that's kind of like a stone in the shoe. I don't care for that, right? And then a layer below that would be the race stuff, with the fact that like not only is this movie like incredibly diverse in terms of the casting. Well, it's kind of funny, like the only Greek in the movie, like the only Greek that has a speaking line in the movie is
Is
the
the guy
guy.
who says, "We thought
Yeah.
you were the Sea Peoples," and then an Indian man tells him, "No, we're
Yes.
Greeks from Ithaca,
Yes, and then
New York."
what they do with Helen of Troy, not just casting her in the first place, but like making her into like the abused victim of Menelaus and all that sort of stuff, and everything you could argue that says about race issues and things like that. And then you go all the way down to something like feminism. By the time we get to feminism, people on the right aren't noticing these things anymore. This is an incredibly feminist movie. Has lots of examples of really kind of noxious feminist anachronisms that are just there to like make like a sort of ideological argument, and they don't even make sense for the characters. And I think the most egregious one you could hand wave away because it just is not in keeping with her character at all,
Oh,
is when
Penelope.
Penelope goes on that rant about how she could
Screed.
be on the throne. Like, she has years of experience. Why can't I be on the throne?
Okay,
It's
so
like, okay,
really, yeah. While we're talking about that too, by the way, because I'm jumping back and forth between giving my take on things that happen in the movie and whatnot. So that just focusing on the events of the movie, if we were going to do that, right? Penelope we see her tell Telemachus, well, pretty soon I'm going to finish this shroud and I'm going to have to remarry, right? That
Yes.
the elders have decreed that that's how it's going to have to go down. And when Telemachus goes, wow, you'd betray your husband like that because he's coming home, she gives him some shit for it. She calls him a child and calls him naive for not understanding the gravity of the situation, that she
Yes.
has to do this, right? He goes off, he leaves, he comes back. He finds out. Like he basically hatches a scheme with his dad to say to Penelope, like, oh, maybe it's time you remarry, set up a contest or whatever. And when he says this to her, she screeds in his face about how, because what? Because a woman can't sit here. I've been here for 20 years. I have qualifications too. She screams at him, and then
Yeah.
immediately at the end of it says, I don't want a new king. I want Odysseus, right? And
Yeah.
she storms off. It doesn't add up to anything that we've seen her character believes or is working towards until that
No.
point. And then it never plays a role in her actions later, right? Like if
No.
she was actively attempting to take the throne in some way, shape, or form, right? And she got caught
No,
with
but
that.
she
But she
doesn't.
doesn't.
All it is the writer of the movie, Christopher Nolan, saying like someone had the thought, either someone asked him this or he had the thought himself, like, oh, why couldn't she be queen? Ugh, backwards ancient culture. Am I right? Well, I'll acknowledge that so everyone knows that I'm willing to acknowledge that, and then it won't factor into the story at all. That's the most maybe egregious example of like in your face feminist nonsense that doesn't really fit in the story at all, but is there because they feel like it has to be there. It's the most egregious, but also the most like you can ignore it because it doesn't make any sense and it never amounts to anything. However, throughout the movie, women are never held responsible for their actions at any point in the movie ever. And this is like perfectly in keeping with modern, call it woke,
Yes.
call it ideological, call it liberal, whatever you want to call it, is perfectly in keeping with the way we tell stories in the modern day. Just look at the Jean Grey discourse for the new Spider-Man movie. Women are not held responsible for their actions in movies these days. And this is another great example. There are so many to choose from, but I think maybe the most egregious here is Calypso, because Calypso finds Odysseus shipwrecked on the island and is like drugging him with opiates at first to like bring him back to health. Once he is back to physical health, she continues to give him opiates that cause lotus flowers based, but opiates basically that cause him to lose his memory and forget who he is and why he's here, so that he will stay here longer because she doesn't want him to leave. She does this to him for 7 years. 7 years until he finally kind of wakes up and goes, no, I do need to go home. And then when this confrontation happens, she's like, well, yeah, sorry, I didn't want you to leave. I couldn't bear to have your mind restored because that might mean you would leave. But then I realized that that you needed that time and this is what you needed all along. And now you're ready. The movie actually presents it like it just so happens that 7 years she held him against his will was exactly how long he needed to get over it. And so really she didn't do anything wrong by keeping him captive and like forcing him to not remember who he is for 7 years.
Yeah. And
Like
well, I honestly, I thought, I thought you were gonna use the example of Helen. Like running
I
off
think the
and not
Calypso one is
violate the
I
Calypso
think the
one.
Calypso
Not, yeah, her not being held accountable because Helen gets, they Helen does kind of get some, I wouldn't call it justice necessarily. The movie certainly doesn't think so, right? And
yeah.
given the actual nature of the start of the Trojan War, I feel like it's a little bit insane to describe it that way, like as if like yeah, but Helen does sort of face consequences, you could say. The movie clearly thinks she shouldn't have, but
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, like, it's not like everything works out for her perfectly in the same way
yeah,
it does for Calypso. But I think the Calypso one is the worst because no one talks about it. But I remember watching that scene and thinking, like, no, wait a minute. Like, you did something horrific, actually. But Matt Damon doesn't seem to think so, and the movie doesn't think so either. When it comes to Cersei turning the men into pigs, which, except for the way this sequence ends, is maybe the best sequence in the movie
I mean, I
because
thought
at
that was
least the
pretty
body
sick.
horror stuff is really cool, actually. But Cersei ultimately, when the men come back to life, they're like, we should kill her. And I'm in the audience going, yeah, 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 you should. You should definitely kill her. And Matt Damon says, like, no, where do you think she got her powers? Your gods. You can't kill her because then your gods might get angry with you. He says your gods as if he doesn't even believe in them, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't even believe in these omens and in terms of fate being controlled by the god. He doesn't even believe it, but he pretends to for this moment just so he can say that she doesn't deserve to die when she absolutely deserves to die. Absolutely.
Yes.
She has
Well, yeah,
killed
because they
untold numbers of men. She has broken Zeus's law. The movie is aware that she's broken Zeus's law, but the movie kind of thinks she's a victim of like men's like ugly nature, and so really she's just doing what she can to survive, essentially. And so the
well, yeah,
movie
but then
doesn't really hold her
she
responsible.
also turned like because she turned her own sister into a crow. We don't know if she did it like why she did it or for what
Yeah, like I
crime.
guess
It,
that is the sort of contradiction that makes it hard to talk about this movie. For example, because you could say, like, oh, certainly there's some feminism happening here in the fact that the movie bends over backwards for no reason to say that Cersei it can't be held responsible and shouldn't be killed for what she's doing when, what she is doing is worse than what the suitors do, to be clear.
yes, she's eating
Like
them.
unequivocally.
She- um,
Unequivocally, she is worse than the suitors. Right.
and this is an
We're
interesting.
hold on.
Yeah,
We're
go for it.
supposed to take glee and satisfaction when they're all mowed down later. So the fact that Cersei, we're not supposed to like take any sort of measure to like get justice for all of her crimes is kind of galling, actually. But if you're going to talk about the contradiction, you would say, well, it's not a perfectly feminist thing because clearly the movie is doesn't think she's a perfectly innocent victim because she did this horrible thing to her sister, and so like, and it's like, yeah, but that doesn't undermine the other thing. You know what I mean? Like it's not perfectly rigidly ideological at every turn because like it's a contradictory mess.
Yeah.
But there is certainly an ideological motivation behind the fact that we're supposed to be like, yeah, kill those suitors. They sucked. But Cersei, yeah, she's been through a lot. We can't kill her.
There is also that weird contradiction of the fact that he, very clearly doesn't very clearly doesn't believe in the gods. Like he's saying all the things that tell you that he is not like that he doesn't believe in them, right? Like all we do end up finding out that his, hallucinations of Athena are just, PTSD flashbacks to the priestess who they slaughtered, in the city of Troy, right? But after their meeting in with all of the zombies, the dead and
Yeah.
lost souls of
In
of the
Hades.
in Hades, which like we've gone to the underworld, right? Like we've gone to the other underworld, and one of the warnings is you're going to come to an island where the sun god grazes his cattle. Don't let your men eat the cattle, right?
Yeah.
And he like the movie takes that part very seriously, right?
Yeah.
But also kind of like talking out of the other half of its mouth, saying like, yeah, but the gods aren't really they're not real though, not really. But like, don't eat the sun god's cattle; he'll be mad. That'll infuriate the rest of them. But are they really real though? I don't know. I feel
It's
like it's
weird
all
because it's
it's all
like
us, right?
it feels like, because he's taking a prophecy from people he knows to be dead very seriously while simultaneously going like, okay, like in his mind, I'm pretty sure Odysseus is like, well, obviously they're not the sun god's cattle, they're just cattle. But a dead man did tell me that this is the prophecy, so I will obey it or else. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it is. It
Like,
takes like
okay,
yeah, but it
okay,
treats it like it treats it with the same gravity that the poem treats it, as if
yeah,
it's like the ultimate sin against the sun god. Like okay. Wasserman also really quickly she asked, was Cersei killed by Odysseus in the book? I don't remember. No, Cersei is a goddess
who
in
can't be
who
killed, right?
can't be killed. Well, I don't know, like maybe, but she is a goddess in the book who, when they catch her like through Odysseus's wit, when they catch her in this scheme to turn them all into pigs, right, through his wit and his faith in her. So when he shows up, his men are turned into pigs, but Hermes comes to him and leads him to it, or gives him an herb and says like, hey, she's going to try to feed you some, or give you some wine that'll stun you and transform you. You need to take this herb, and that will make sure that you are preserved. But at this point in the story, he is well aware the gods are all mad at him. At the very least, he knows that the gods are not, like, Poseidon is not happy with him, and the other gods are not doing much to stop it, right? So he has to have faith that this is not some trick from the gods in some way, right? Which he, of course, he has a moment where he wonders, because he is a tricky person himself, but he has to have faith that this is going to work. So he goes in, he does that, and then she realizes that the magic isn't working on him, she turns the men back into, she offers to turn the men back into humans, but he has to sacrifice something to her, which is his fidelity to his wife. He has to have sex, she has to have sex with her in order to gain her favor and her aid to move home. But he ends up staying there for a year with Cersei and her handmaids, and that is kind of like the malaise sets in, right? And to be fair, that's one of those things that might be kind of difficult to adapt for a modern audience. Sure. So you may not want to do it that way. There are a million other ways you could do it.
Yeah.
And still preserve the original meaning and import of that scene. Other than this.
Yeah. As such, it is one of many examples of like a feminist motivation in terms of how we handle the sins of the characters, right? And how we assess them morally and what we think we ought to do about people who break certain moral rules in the story. And that is to circle back to the point, the Ben Shapiro and his ilk, the conservatives who think, oh, this is a story about like a breakdown in morals destroying society, so like setting that right is a good thing, so it's a conservative message. I'm like, okay, I know you noticed that there's the trans stuff, clearly that bothered you, and the race stuff you're like willing to overlook in some cases, but then like it's almost like feminism has just become so normal, even on the right, that people don't even notice it anymore. And it's just like, that drives me nuts. I'm like, does that not bother you guys at all? Like, really? It doesn't bother you at all that, like, the only people we're really supposed to take satisfaction in killing in this movie are the young men of the tribe? Like, really?
The young men who, so their
like,
crime
I know
draft
suck,
dodging,
but...
right? Their crime is draft dodging from a
And
war that the movie views as inherently immoral.
Yeah, like Antinous is a bad guy, and I'm totally fine with killing him. Do not get me wrong, but there are so many other people in this story that I'd be totally fine with killing, as well, or at least having the gall to even criticize narratively would be good, I think. But it's telling who, because like I said, the suitors don't do anything worse than Cersei does, as far as I'm concerned. So it's like,
no, they do not.
What
they do
doing?
not. There's another interesting comment in here, right? About like Odysseus lying isn't bad. He lies multiple times, but it's like usually to try to protect himself. In almost every instance, it is. And there's a really not the lying and the tricking not being viewed as bad is another thing that I want to that I hated about this movie is that his whole like little honor system of dry firing his bow every single time he goes to hunt, right? His whole thing about like I am the noble and like I am noble Matt Damon, John Odyssey type, like I play by the rules and I'm fair and I look you in the eye and give you a chance to fight back. I'm a sporting man, There's a great moment when Odysseus lands on Ithaca in the poem, right? And Athena comes to him in disguise as a young boy. Odysseus is not aware that he is home on Ithaca. He thinks that he has been abandoned in some random like that because he fell asleep on the journey, a deep God-inspired sleep. So he doesn't know where he is. He knows he's got a bunch of treasure hanging around that the Numenorians gave him, and then a young boy approaches him in a land that's shrouded with mist, and he lies to this person about who he is, and then Athena reveals that it's her, and she basically goes like, can't even stop lying now, huh? Can't even, That's good. That's good. Good to see that your mind is still sharp because it's going to need to be because you've got a big task ahead of you. Is essentially what that
Yeah.
episode is showing, right? That Athena is testing to
Here I
make
go lying
sure,
again.
yeah, testing to make sure his wit and his tactfulness are still intact, right? That it
Yes.
hasn't been damaged. That was an opportunity to reclaim a trickster type character, a trickster hero for the Western world, right? To give us this sort of like heroic con man type. And he completely ignored that to just give us your prototypical bog standard fucking like honorable man. Like honorable man
Yeah,
played by
yeah.
Matt Damon.
Yeah,
It's
well, here's
so
the thing.
lame
It is really
comparatively.
lame. It is really lame, but ultimately part of the problem is that like because the story depends on him being a trickster figure, like the beats of like the overall story have to have him being somewhat of a trickster or else nothing makes sense. He has to keep some moments where he's a tricky guy, and then now those moments don't fit anymore. So as you mentioned it, but let's put a finer point on it. When Odysseus is shown in a flashback giving a lesson to fellow youth of Ithaca about hunting, he specifically we're shown that he doesn't ambush kill any of his prey. He dry fires his bow, which is a really dumb thing to do to a bow, but he does it anyway. He dry fires his bow to alert his prey that he's there and to make it, quote, a fair fight. So dedicated to fair fights is he in giving them a sporting chance that he won't even ambush when he hunts, right? This is supposed to be showing us a sort of like deep sense of fairness that he has in his character, right? But then ultimately, the story needs to have it be that he does the Trojan horse trick, right? And so he has to come up with the Trojan horse thing. But we don't even ever see him come up with it. We don't see him conflicted about the trick itself. He just says, like, oh, here's what we're going to do. And then ultimately, once we see them like enter Troy and they like start killing everyone, he's like, everything's going well until he sees like the priestess and like
Zendaya.
random civilians, Zendaya being killed, and then he's like, oh man, I didn't think this was gonna happen because he's stupid. Did I mention that he's stupid? He's a very stupid character and makes a number of really dumb decisions in the movie. But
Well,
he
and so then
is
like
hold on, he's surprised by that this is the end result of his trick. He's like, oh man, oh god, look at all this horror. Oh my god, this is terrible. That really annoys me. But then, like, and the other thing was, there are several examples throughout the rest of the movie where he does give people like a fighting chance or whatever. Like he plays it honorable, right? Because he's kind of ashamed of the deception until the very end when it's time to kill the suitors.
exactly what I was gonna say because he
Yes, you take it
removes
away.
all the weapons from the hall. Like he's the guy
Yes,
who's like, no, yeah, everybody should have a fair chance to fight back against me, even the deer and the boars and everything, right? Even to the detriment, like if it might cause my own demise, like if you if when the boar charges at him and he gets like he gets attacked, right? It's like
yeah.
okay, so then, what we're gonna do here to get rid of the suitors, all right? Because everybody deserves a fair chance. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do my little dry fire of the bow before I start killing them all. But I got to make sure that they can't have
No,
any
no, no,
weapons.
no, no, no.
So I've
Here's
got to
even
get the
worse.
weapons out of all. I got to get all the weapons out of the hall so that they actually have no chance of fighting back against me. And I'm gonna lock all the doors so they have no chance of running away.
He
Do you
doesn't
see
even
how
do the drive.
incongruent it is? Like,
Yes.
he does do the dry fire. Like he
Hold
does.
on, hold on, because it's even worse than you remember. He does the dry fire of the bow before he shoots it through the axes, not before he starts mowing them down.
But he starts mowing them down like right after he shoots it through the axes, though, right? Like,
Yeah, I know,
yeah.
but I mean, like even the dry fire of the bow
You
is
know,
not
there are people who
actually.
are going to sit there and tell you that the dry fire of the bow is
I
the
know,
moment when he
and
gives them the
I
warning,
know, Hugh, and
right?
that's what I'm making that argument right now. So it is not actually functioning as a warning in the scene. The only person that takes it as a warning is Antinous. He's the only person that, when he does the dry fire of the bow right before he shoots it through the axes to fulfill the challenge, Antinous is the only one who sees him do that and goes, "Whoa, shit! Wait a minute! Oh fuck! Oh shit! Oh gosh! Oh man!" Like he's the only one that does that because he remembers. No one else remembers. it is not actually functioning as a warning, because then as soon as he does the challenge, he just goes like, "Ah, surprise, bitch," and he starts killing them, right? And he kills them all before they have any chance to go, "Oh, Odysseus, I'm so glad you're back." He just starts killing them. Eventually, people will start to kneel, and then he spares them. We'll come back to that. But the dry firing of the bow is not even functioning as a warning in this scene. It's just a cool thing he does for
Yeah,
aura,
for aura
basically.
farming. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's aura
You're right.
farming.
I cannot pronounce that name, dude. The Oodle says he's destroying your argument in real time. It wasn't. It's not
I'm not
really
destroying
my.
your
It's
argument.
not
I'm
really
just I
my
was
argument because I think the whole thing is stupid. But like,
no,
yeah,
it's just you were talking about an argument that I was in the middle of
yeah,
responding to, but that's all right. We made it through.
yeah.
No, because you're absolutely right. It's
But
totally
somebody says too, like, why didn't he do the dry fire in the Cersei Island? He does. He does the dry fire on the Cersei Island, and the antelope that is a human starts running away, and he starts chasing
yeah,
after it. Yeah,
because he's even though he's starving, he's just that committed to it being a fair fight until the climactic moment of the movie where because, they tried to kill his son, fair enough, and because they were mean to his dog, slightly less fair, and because they were taking up too much of his wife's hospitality and being rude house guests, they all deserve to die. And so, let's talk about this because I want to. The killing of the suitors is, I think, a total fundamental contradiction in who his character is presented to be, because we present him to be sporting, honorable man that won't even ambush his prey when he's hunting and starving. But at the end of the movie, I think the best you could say is because he wouldn't have been able to kill them otherwise, he takes away all their weapons and like locks them in a room, and then starts immediately mowing them down, if you will, with his bow without giving them any chance to respond, without giving them a chance to kneel. He just starts killing them. And we don't even just see him start to kill the ones that we know were plotting to kill his son. We see him start to kill all of them. Do we assume that they were all equally interested in murdering his son? Like, that's kind of a big assumption. But if we do assume that, if we assume that they were all an existential threat to the lives of his family, then why did we spare any of them when they kneeled? That's really stupid if they were all potentially like an existential threat. Just because they kneel doesn't mean they don't secretly want to kill you still. If they were all deserving of death and that you can just start mowing them down indiscriminately, then you shouldn't spare any of them. But he does spare some of them, but he spares the ones who kneel. And the movie just wants us to assume that, like, oh, well, I guess only the good guys knelt and only the bad guys got killed, and it all worked out perfectly. And but even if like necessity required that Odysseus like spring this trap, even though it's against his own personal moral code, you would expect him to like show some remorse about it. He doesn't. I think it's just fundamentally just is incongruent, because this is what happens in the original poem, more or less. And so it's kept because it's a really cool part of the poem and it's iconic and all that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, we've made him into a different character that would not do this anymore. He's changed so much that what is original to the story that he kept doesn't fit. Many such cases in the movie, I would argue.
yep. Somebody mentioned the fight choreography in this scene too, which like
Oh
it's
God.
really
Yeah.
bad, but also, and I was watching finally Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare the other day. Very
Oh
fun
yeah.
movie, but one of the things that bugs me a lot in in like medieval fight scenes like this, and it works a little bit better in Lord of the Rings, but like still, like, when I'm watching these ones that are meant to sort of be like, oh, we're doing like a gritty realistic version of something, right? The arrows being one hit kills almost every single time. I'm just like, man, like that's that's not how that
Yeah.
works. But
You know what's funny, really quick? It was being shared a lot because a lot of people were talking about the climactic scene with the suitors. Robert Pattinson saying, "Somebody get these beggars out of here," and all the other fun stuff, right? Um,
he really puts
yeah,
everything into that hard
I
B.
like him in this movie. It's not a good movie. He doesn't have a lot of great material to work with, but he's doing his best and he's very captivating. So good for him. But when everyone was talking about the climactic scene of this movie, a lot of people were sharing the comparable scene from the, I believe, 1997 TV movie, which is a
Armand
much smaller.
Assante, Hallmark Productions Odyssey.
It
This
was
is
a
my
different
hot take.
time.
The Hallmark Productions Odyssey is better than this one.
I'm not surprised to hear that because I've only seen this sequence and it is better, unequivocally. What's funny about it is that Nolan has changed so much about the morals and ethics of the story that like we talked about already, Odysseus like killing them this way doesn't really make a lot of sense. In the original, we haven't changed the morals of the story to fit modern sensibilities. So when Odysseus comes back and is like, "Yeah, there's a bunch of traitors in my house. Of course I'm going to kill them all." It's just like, yeah, obviously. It's just way cleaner. There's no contradiction in his character. There's no contradiction in like the morals and ethics of the time. In the logic of the original story, they all just deserve to die. And it's like, yeah, cool, go get him, Tiger. And so he does. But even in the 97 version, which is much more faithful, at least in this sequence and how it's supposed to go, the suitors fire first. Even in the 97 version, like he shows himself, he takes off his disguise and like magically transforms because that's fun, Chris. You can have some fun stuff in your movie if you want.
Your
Anyway,
movie with magic. You've got a woman
yeah,
turning people into pigs. He can do magic disguises.
yeah, that
I
would
know
be fun.
Platoon already talked about this one too, right? But it is a crime that he decided to go with like this idea of, oh, we're gonna have like more feminist screeds, and we're gonna make it seem as if Helen of Troy is a battered woman and misunderstood as the cause of the war, right? And that's how we're gonna make it feminist. But then we completely remove the fact that Athena drives the entire plot of the story. She's the reason any of it happens, and she is an active participant.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's meaningful actually, Chris. You probably should have kept that. Yeah, but you have Cersei turning men into pigs, but you can't have Odysseus like disguising himself with magic. Why? Anyway, it's cool. Anyway, but when he reveals himself and magically transforms back into Odysseus in the 97 version, they're like in different language because it doesn't have the modern American language problem, but they essentially go, "Oh fuck, it's Odysseus. Look out." Right? And then they get locked in and then sensing that, their demise is imminent, they start attacking first. It's way
Yeah.
cleaner in every way. And we didn't even do the thing where we made him a sportsman that like insists on them fighting first. You know what I mean? Like it's just amazing how much cleaner it is
Yeah.
when you don't add this extra modern like emotional baggage on top of it. Because when you do that, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense that he does that.
Jim
The
Henson's
way
Creature
he does
Workshop
it.
did the Cyclops in the 1997 version. Wow, that explains why I liked that better than this. It explains a lot about that, actually. Jim Henson is pretty fucking good at practical effects, man. That stuff looks great. And I don't want to completely, diss the Cyclops. I know there are a lot of people who thought it looked really cool, and I do appreciate that he went and did a live action puppetry kind of thing with
For
it
some of it, yeah.
for some of
Yeah,
it.
I like the design.
Yeah, yeah. I wish that I think a lot of why I'm like more lukewarm on it is because the character of the Cyclops is so fundamentally like gone. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's erased. It's not like it doesn't exist, right? Like
He's like an animal now, even though his behavior doesn't actually isn't animalistic. He behaves like an intelligent creature would, but they just treat him like an animal anyway,
yeah,
essentially.
well, like why didn't it try to talk to us? Would you try to talk with ants? Why didn't you try to talk with it?
Yeah.
Like it makes cheese and it
Yeah.
herds
Good
sheep.
cheese even.
Like good
Yeah.
cheese. Yeah, it herds sheep. Why didn't like and that he tries to talk to it first in the book. Like it's Odysseus trying to like present himself as guests and he
Yeah.
violates the hospitality.
Yeah. But even in this version,
But they
this
decided to
creature.
do this fucking Guillermo del Toro thing. It's like, well, he doesn't consider himself a monster. He doesn't consider himself a monster in the other one, and he
Yeah.
speaks.
Yeah.
He's the king of the Cyclops. They live on a little Cyclops island. He doesn't consider
Yeah.
himself a monster. He just doesn't consider himself a Greek. Like, god damn
Even
it.
even in this version, right? the Cyclops, by this own movie's logic, I should say, the Cyclops has violated Zeus's law, and I like that's part and undeniably so because that's basically what the story is doing. Basically this story is saying that, oh, we're gonna have to come back to this, but Odysseus violates Zeus's law with the Trojan horse trick, kind of starts the breakdown of the world, and then ostensibly we go on a number of different little escapades trying to get home in different scenarios that all sort of reflect in their own different way the breakdown in hospitality, right? And so they go to the Cyclops, and the Cyclops, who is an intelligent creature who herds sheep and makes cheese, just starts killing and eating them like immediately. And it's like, oh, well, okay, well, that's clearly by the movie's logic, that's a
Like
violation of Zeus's law, right?
fucking like bizarrely, by trying to do a Guillermo del Toro type thing, it made the Cyclops more monstrous than it is
Yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah,
original story.
yeah. And then, but then,
Yeah.
weirdly,
Oh, hold on, wait. Because Wasserman, I don't think she's seen the movie yet. She says Polyphemus speaks. That's why Odysseus lies to him. You're
not in this
you're
really.
gonna love this. He doesn't do the nobody thing. That doesn't
No, yeah,
happen in
it's
this
just gone. It's just
movie.
not in the
That's not
not in
in
the
it.
story because Nolan thinks it doesn't play, but it obviously does
Yeah.
play.
Oh my god, when he said that in the interview, when he was just like, "Well, it's a pun." Oh god, what was that? The interview with fucking Jon Stewart, where like Jon Stewart asks him, "Why didn't you include that?" And Christopher Nolan gives him this like derisive answer, was like, "Do you use puns in your comedy, John?" As if it's like
Yes, he
beneath
does
him.
actually.
It's
Yeah,
beneath him to use like an ancient pun
yeah,
and some more and like
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying. It's pretty annoying. It's it's so turn that part of your brain off because it's not about that. That's the best you could
Yeah.
say.
Everything
Um
else in the movie is going to tell you that it's supposed to be about the ancient world, and nominally everybody's going to say they're Greek, and they're not going to act or talk like they're Greek or like we're even trying to code it as if it's the ancient world. Right? I know
yeah.
EFAP touched on this, right? Where it's like the American accents are a little bit distracting because and it's not that we expect Greek accents necessarily, you know. The King's English is kind of the bog standard for what you get, when you're in a fantasy universe, a fantasy world. You expect like some generic form of English accent is kind of the standard, right? But the American accents here, it's like the best you could possibly say is that he's trying to tell you, well, it's not really about like it's not really signaling to your brain that this is supposed to be about the ancient world and that this is a story like Lord of the Rings, for example. It's not supposed to be signaling that. What it's supposed to be signaling is that we're telling a story about modern America, but we're still gonna use the politics of the time. It's like, oh, it's Agamemnon. He's an imperialist Marxist. Like he's an imperialist king who the Marxists don't want to fight for. Not really. And there's ancient customs as like Penelope can't sit on the throne. Absolutely not. She, even though she's qualified because she's been sitting there for 20 years while Odysseus has been gone, and like they're still gonna all of this. But just don't pay too much attention to that. Like, come on, stop taking it so seriously. It's not really about the ancient. It's not the Odyssey. It's not really about the ancient Greek world. But it is the Odyssey. But it's not the Odyssey. Like that's what he's signaling when he's making these choices, like the stormtrooper armor for the Trojans, or the giants who just hang out in full medieval plate mail for some reason on their island. They like again they try to spin that into a violation of the Xenia law, the Zeus's law, right? Because they're just they don't they just attack for they just attack people who land on their island for no reason, really. There's no the cannibalism episode that doesn't come up. Yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just here they are, they're hanging out in medieval plate mail. The lack of the cannibalism episode too. Jamie's gone, so I'm just ranting to you guys right now at this point. The lack of the cannibalism episode also kind of I don't understand why he didn't put it in, right? So the movie is rated R, but there's very little like blood. There's very little like apart from the body horror scene with Cersei and like a little bit with the Cyclops eating the men. He doesn't really take advantage of what you can get away with in an R-rated movie. everything, like there's no blood on the sword when the Trojans stab through the horse. There's not really like sprays of blood or anything like that when the giants are killing the men. When the giant sweaty sock monster at the end that lives in the cave near the whirlpool, when that thing eats 6 people, it's like there's nothing in here that couldn't just be like a P like an edgy PG-13, right? So I don't understand why he decided to delete the cannibalism episode with the giants, because like that you've already got the R rating. Like, why just not go for it, man? Like, you can have some creepy, gory, nasty scenes. The Robert Fagel's translation is full of gross descriptions of like people's brains being bashed in and people getting their limbs torn off, and he's really
Yeah.
reveling. It's almost like Tarantino, like reveling in how much fun it
Because
is.
it's
Because
fun,
it's fun,
Get
Jan.
it.
Yeah, it's like where it seems almost like the only reason he went for the R rating in this movie is so that Matt Damon could say fuck 3 times.
Dude, that was so cringe. That was so cringe when he's
There's no sex.
like
That's another one. Like Emily Wilson said,
years
there's no sex.
on
Where are
the
the
fucking
titties?
beach.
Where's the
Piece of
blood and titties? Put that in the Odyssey. My
yeah.
God, man, it's all throughout the poem.
Yeah, okay.
Come on.
I had to step away for a second and I lost the train of thought.
I was just kind
What
of
did
rambling at that point. Like I was like, I went from being like the Xenia, the violation of Xenia, the incongruent way that it treats that concept,
Yeah.
then just ranting
Oh,
about the fact that they cut the cannibalism episode out of the Giants, and then also that it's like the softest R-rated movie I've ever seen. Like,
did we talk about how stupid the whole giant sequence is?
well, I mentioned it briefly in passing, but please go for it.
The most worthless scene in the movie, not even close. So, people talk about it like it's cool. Clearly, they thought it was cool when they put it in the marketing, but that whole sequence basically amounts to there is a race of giants that wear full plate armor. Even though the movie calls this the Bronze Age, which is like a weird anachronism to have the characters call it the Bronze Age in the Bronze Age is a very meta, dumb thing to do. Setting that aside, we don't actually see any bronze in the movie, basically. But meanwhile, there's like, steel or iron or whatever, like plate armor that these race of giants are in. We arrive on this island to see if there's anyone here that might be able to help us. And it turns out they're all just sitting over like on the other side of the hill in full plate armor, like it's a dumb video game spawn like location. And then when you come up and a little kid who is just kneeling there to trick you, and you say, "Hello, can you help us?" It laughs and then screams and runs away. And then because they're all just sitting around in plate armor, you see, they come over the hill to go rah and attack you and try to kill you. Like, really? Like, what are they doing? Like, why is any of this happening? What are we even learning from it?
Well, like,
Why are we?
like in the episode in the book, it's like they lure him into a trap and then they start eating people, right? Because like
Yeah.
they're cannibals. Like, oh, that's good. That's like
And
that's
they're just
they're
sitting
just
around waiting for
they're
anyone
just
to
spawn
show up.
camping.
Yeah, and then you show up, and then they try to kill you, and you learn nothing, and you leave. And then afterwards, they're like, "Oh, we're not listening to you anymore, Odysseus. You're a bad leader. This is a mutiny." But like, this isn't his fault. The other ones were, but this one isn't. Like this one, it's the only thing this accomplishes is moving along the like, okay, we've had enough of following you, Odysseus. We're gonna take charge now. You're no longer our leader. But this isn't an actual reflection of his poor leadership at all. Really? Like this is just pure dumb, horrible luck.
Yeah, this is
that
like exactly what you should do if you end up on a random island that you don't know where you are. You find somebody and politely ask them to tell you where they are. It's not his fault that the giant kid is a retard who just screams at them like well, points and laughs at first for,
yeah.
some fucking reason because it's creepy. Wow, that's weird. And then screams and like it's not his fault he aggroed the mob, okay? Like he doesn't know that that's there. Right? He doesn't know that talking with that rando NPC child is going to trigger a cutscene. Like it's
Yeah.
just it just happens.
It's nonsense and it doesn't change anything. Like immediately after the Cyclops, they're like, you shouldn't have shot because he shoots the Cyclops. They've escaped. and the
Yeah, right. Okay,
Cyclops,
so like
who is
real, yeah.
hold on. They've escaped the Cyclops. They've blinded it, and then they've snuck out of its cave without it being aware, and so they're home free, right? But Odysseus in this movie, not in the poem, decides I'm mad at this creature for killing a bunch of my men, and so I'm going to shoot it with an arrow, even
Immediately
though
turn around and shoot it. Like the okay, we
yes,
got to make sure that this is like, especially for those of you who haven't seen it and who are unaware of how this goes down, right? So in the poem, what happens is they lash themselves to the bellies of the sheep. The sheep crawl because the Cyclops is like blind but and standing guard at the door, and he's like feeling the backs of the sheep to make sure there's wool there before he lets anything out, right? In They get to their ships and they hear the Cyclops like weeping, and Odysseus, in a fit of pride, screams out to him like, and by the way, tell him that it was Odysseus who of Ithaca who blinded you, you loser. And so then the Cyclops starts attacking them, and that means that he can call his father Poseidon, and be like, "Hey, did you hear
put a
that?
curse on him,
Put a curse on
essentially.
Odysseus. He blinded me. It was Odysseus of Ithaca. Odysseus,
Hugh did
get
this.
him. Hugh did this exactly in this version, right? Because he hasn't done the nobody thing, and he hasn't done the nobody thing, and they're not lashing themselves to the bellies of the rams or anything like that. They're not doing that. The Cyclops is just kind of like lying there half delirious with its hand outstretched. Every now and then the finger brushes the back of the rams, but it's just kind of there, right? It doesn't He's not really
Yeah,
like, actively checking. So they just kind of crawl underneath it as
yeah,
the rams are going through, and they all
yeah.
get out. They like everybody who hasn't been eaten, they all make it out, and they are walking down the hill, and immediately Odysseus just goes, "Ooh, I'm mad." So he turns around and shoots the thing, letting it know where they are so that it chases them down the hill. Even like it's blind, right? So it chases them in a perfectly straight line down the hill.
And they
Just
run in a
and they
perfectly
run in a
straight
perfectly
line.
straight line.
As CinemaSins would say, they went to the Prometheus school of running away from things. Yeah.
Yeah. So like he does still fail
Unironically,
because of
though.
ego here, but it's just relentlessly more stupid than the version that he failed
Yeah.
like from the poem.
It's not even just ego. It's more that like he's so mad that this thing killed all his men, so like he
He has no
shoots it.
hope of killing it. He doesn't think he's gonna
No,
kill it. He just wants to piss it
he loses
off.
his temper, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous and it's really dumb and it's not smart and it results in a lot of his men getting killed. And then they're like, "Hey, by the way, that was Poseidon's son." And Odysseus is like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "We heard it say, we heard it calling out to Poseidon in Greek.
So
You
Odysseus
shot
is the only one who
a."
doesn't speak Greek.
I guess he didn't hear them. I guess he didn't hear this part.
Oh
But
my
anyway, they're
god.
like,
Speaking
"Oh,
of
hold
hearing,
on."
yeah.
But Poseidon is mad at you now because that was Poseidon's son. And then Odysseus says, like, "Well, yeah, I don't, it's best not to believe in omens and nonsense like that." And so immediately, the next event is they go to the Lystragonians, the giants, right? And after the giants attack them through no fault of Odysseus's, decisions, then they're like, "Oh, we're not going to follow you anymore, Odysseus." But like, why not have it be, because they will eventually do this, but why not have it be that they get stuck in a storm? Because they do get stuck in a storm between these two locations, but this first time it doesn't kill a bunch of people. Why not have the storm kill a bunch of people instead of, and cut the giants out completely? Because if you're not going to do anything useful with them, and then have it be that like, oh, immediately there's a storm and the storm kills a number of his men, and so that's like a direct consequence of the Cyclops scene.
Yeah.
And that might result in them going, okay, well, we don't want you to be leader anymore because clearly Poseidon's mad at us and blah 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 blah.
Well
Right?
then you wouldn't get the really cool action sequence of the giants chasing them through the woods that move.
I don't know that it was really cool. I will say, one thing I did like is I liked when the trees were shifting in isolation. That's cool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't do anything with it really. I liked the trees moving.
Yeah,
That was
that looks
fun
kind of
and
neat,
crazy.
but like it didn't
Yeah,
yeah, it
it was
didn't it
cool.
didn't affect them though. Not really, anyway. Like it ends up being either way they were going to lose two ships at this beach because they had to because the story needs it to just be one
Yeah.
ship by the time the mutiny
Yes.
comes around. So like why
Yeah.
not just
That
do
could
it
have
in
been
the
a
storm?
storm. Just do it in a storm.
Yeah.
It's cleaner.
Now, speaking of not hearing the Cyclops, Odysseus is just the only one who didn't hear the Cyclops. And Jamie, I think we talked about this briefly. And anybody else who's seen the movie, please let me know if this was an issue for you as well. I'm genuinely curious. The sound balancing in this movie was abysmal. There were several
Yes.
times I had to plug my ears because it was so fucking loud that it actually physically hurt.
Yeah. No, same thing.
And the
I
Cyclops cave was one of them when it starts screaming after he's been blinded. I was like, I'm like, bro, turn it down. Like, I get it, turn it down.
it's
This is
too loud.
insane. Everybody in that cave, if this is doing this to me in a movie theater, everybody in that cave's eardrums just exploded and their
Yeah.
brains are leaking out of them. They're all dead.
Yeah. They're all dead. Speaking of sound design being horrific, also when they first go into the cave, discover that oh, whoever lives in this cave makes cheese and herds sheep. Maybe they'll have food, and then they're like, "Oh my God!" They hear the giant footsteps. Boom, boom. Here comes the Cyclops. And they close the door, and they're like, "Oh no! How terrifying!" And then suddenly, the Cyclops doesn't make any noise when it moves. It's like a full, it's like a full Spielberg cheating with the
Yeah.
T-Rex at the end of Jurassic Park, where suddenly the thing that we just established makes a lot of noise when it moves can like maneuver around them in the cave, and so the camera's doing this like, oh, like isn't this really tense thing where like it's kind of spinning around, and all of a sudden, even though they could see the Cyclops was just there at the entrance to the cave where the light just faded from, they all start turning around as if it could be behind them. And it's like, do not turn your back on the place where like obviously the giant would still be. Like the movie is actually full of a lot of these like blocking, I guess you could say choreography decisions and sound design decisions that are actually just pretty amateurish actually. It
Yeah.
doesn't it
It,
reflects poorly on all his men that they all just start turning around as if it could be behind them instead of like
and
keeping their attention focused at like where the obvious
where
giant
where the
monster
giant
is.
arms just came out of the darkness to grab two people, right? Like it's
Yes.
not moving at a great speed. The other thing, the amateurish aspect of the sound design, right, is like this feels like the kind of problem that you have where you do all your mixing through headphones and never test it on a speaker.
Well,
Like
that's, it does seem like that. I doubt that's what happened,
it
but I
can't
think
be, but it feels like it, and like, it's
he
that, and
must be
that's kind
he
of
must be partially deaf at this point.
yeah,
I don't think there's any other explanation. But like speaking of the sound design, right? Another thing that really drove me crazy that felt very amateurish as well, right? Throughout the movie, when people are having like intimate conversations with each other, they're basically whispering, right? Because they were, there was basically no sound on set. It was all very quiet, and these two actors are really close together. You can understand why they would whisper. But then he's going to add really loud music. Kind of, it's not as bad as Tenet, maybe, but it's the same kind of problem that he has in this movie. And so, in order that the whispered conversation is audible over the music you want to have underneath the scene, you have to really, really boost the sound of the dialogue, and then it gets kind of harsh. Like all the like high end frequencies that you had to boost the sound because they're whispering and there's a lot of airiness. There's a lot of like high frequencies. When you boost that up really, really loud because it has to play over this like Ludwig Göransson's score and everything, like it's really brittle and kind of harsh on the ears. I don't care for it. It feels kind of like an amateurish mistake to me, honestly. Like, and he's had these criticisms about his sound design for several movies now, and I think they're totally valid. Where it's like, okay, you're gonna have really loud, actually, music underneath these scenes of just people talking in a room. I think you need to anticipate that and have your actors speak up a little. Like,
yeah,
but
like
but he doesn't seem willing to give
just do
actors direction.
ADR, you asshole! Like
Well, he
god
hates
damn it!
ADR. He hates
Just
ADR.
if you're gonna do this with the music, just do ADR. Oh my
No,
god.
he hates ADR
Oh
because
yeah,
he
but
hates
and then that
artifice.
makes him like the greatest living filmmaker of our era, is because he doesn't like letting you hear the dialogue. Like, well, first of all, we know he can't write dialogue. All the dialogue in this movie is shit. If you go and watch Platoon's video series, one of the very first that points that he makes, he'll play the scene between Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson, and say basically just like, this is the dialogue through the whole movie. This is what it sounds like. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's very, very bad, right? But
It's very
like,
clunky. It's very on the nose. It's very this also drives me nuts when people talk about Nolan like he's one of the greatest filmmakers we have. Nolan has a really bad problem with on the nose clunky exposition, and he gets away with it for reasons that are unclear to me. I don't understand them. They're a mystery. Like people will call this a great film when it's full of dialogue, characters saying just exactly what they need to for the audience, even though both characters would already know and understand this and have talked about it many times over. This is most extreme with everything to do with Tom Holland's Telemachus, Telemachus, whatever his name is.
Telemachus is,
Telemachus.
yeah,
Right. So he is constantly asking questions that people are giving him answers to just tell him what the stakes of the story are, even though this has been happening for like 7 years. And I'm supposed to pretend like this is really clever and brilliant, like that he's a master of the craft. No, he isn't. Not
no.
anymore, anyway. This is bad dialogue. There's bad dialogue throughout the movie, and like every kind of bad dialogue, like over reliance on clunky exposition that doesn't make any logical sense for the characters to be saying. Uh, Characters saying things that like totally contradict who they're supposed to be, as established elsewhere in the movie. Like a total like lack of elegance in the prose itself. You know,
You,
it's just
Wasserman, that's a good point. I've just been so involved in this discussion that I forgot to change us over to the trailer while we've been talking. Usually we try to do that like when spoilers are gonna come up, but like I don't know. I'll just put it on there now. Oh shit, where are you guys? Hold on. You've disappeared from my. See, okay, now if I put oh, there you go. You're back. Cool. Look at that. All right, we're on the trailer now. You get some moving pictures. You can have your subway surfers, to keep you focused. You know, there you go. I just yes, but yeah, okay. So like the cult of Nolan, the cult of Christopher Nolan. I know that's going to be like the fourth chapter in Platoon's Odyssey. Um, let's talk about that a little bit real quick because I am very curious. The more I see of his stuff, the less impressed I am.
yeah,
That seems to be like I'm the Benjamin Button to your normal cinema goer. Like most people,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
most people, their trajectory goes the opposite way to the point where people are calling this his like magnum opus, right? This is the greatest thing he's ever made.
Oh, absolutely.
Cosmonaut Variety Hour, for example, hates Christopher Nolan movies except Oppenheimer and this, right? Um, why? What, like I'm very confused because like everybody seems to acknowledge most of the issue, like even if you're a casual viewer, right? It seems like most people acknowledge the issues of, hey, the accents are a bit distracting, the sound design is not great, my ears were ringing like I just left a nightclub after I got out of this movie, right? Like there's bits that I don't really know why this scene is here. I don't think it functions. Oh, he cuts everything a little bit too tight, so the dialogue moves a little too quickly, and there's never anything, never any time for it to breathe. People
Yeah.
all notice this stuff, and yet they still act as if it is the greatest thing that like the best thing since the last one he put out. And like
Yeah.
oh, he shot it all in IMAX. Even the medium close-up scenes that don't look great when you shoot them in IMAX. But like but what are we doing here? Like what has happened to the
Well, here,
like
I'll give
people
you
are
another
comparing him to
example
Kubrick,
of
right?
I'm gonna give you another example of something that I think any like master of their craft should have the ability to do, and it's make sure all the actors are in the same movie.
Yes, that's well, as a director, that's kind of your first job.
Yeah, well, see, what I've gathered, and some people will talk about this like it's a good thing, but I've seen plenty of clips of people talk about what it's like working with Nolan. Nolan doesn't give actors a lot of notes. Some people like it. Gary Oldman likes it because, from Gary Oldman's perspective, oh no, where'd the background of the thing go?
I don't know.
What happened?
I don't. It's
Oh no. Did I mess up
Yeah, I think that
the
one's on your end because I clicked the. There must be some black video at the end of it because I clicked the on and off, hide
Oh, it's
unhide, and
in
yeah.
I know what I did. I accidentally left the trailer for the Aristocats like 3 minutes later. So it's gonna be dark for like 2 minutes and then show the trailer for the Aristocats with no background and then
Okay,
it's gonna reset. So you know what?
beautiful.
No Subway Surfers. Let's just we're
Just
gonna
stick
go
to Matt
back.
Damon.
We're gonna stick to
No, I don't know.
whoops.
I think it would be kind of funny if we have the Aristocats show up at random.
Oh, okay. That's fine. You can leave it. Well, leave it as is. Um what the fuck was I talking about? Pardon the language. What were we talking about?
The cult of Christopher Nolan and
Oh,
the
oh,
things that
okay.
people all seem to
Okay.
know are not great, but that they praise anyway.
Gary Oldman likes that Christopher Nolan doesn't give him a lot of directions because from Gary Oldman's perspective, he's a good director because he's just trusting you to do your thing. The acting, that's your responsibility, and that makes sense if you're dealing with someone like
Like
Gary
Gary
Oldman,
Oldman, who
who's
you
going
know,
to be
yeah.
great in basically everything. He doesn't need a lot of direction. You don't need to hold his hand. He's a very talented actor, and he's always going to bring it, right?
Yeah.
What I've noticed about Christopher Nolan movies is that the performances being good seems to come down entirely to the actor doing all of that themselves, right? Like Killian Murphy, fantastic actor. I think he's great in Oppenheimer. I think his performance is almost entirely coming from Killian
It
Murphy.
has to be.
I
It
think
has to be.
it, because what I've noticed about his movies is that sometimes people give performances that are either kind of flat or muted, or maybe they're like overacting in a way that kind of actually feels incongruent with everyone else's performance, and it just stays in the movie. And he doesn't seem like he tells anyone what to do in terms of notes. He doesn't direct them, it seems, very much. And so you get this movie, which is maybe the most egregious example of it. But like Anne Hathaway and Matt Damon and Travis Scott and all these people, they all feel like they're in different movies. None of them particularly good, I would say. But like even Robert Pattinson, who I like in this movie, he's one of the few people. Him and John Leguizamo are like the only people I would say like I think they're giving a great performance. I wish this movie was better so that they would have more interesting things to do. Everyone else, like Anne Hathaway, is really hamming it up like she's trying for an Oscar. And
Oh
everyone's
yeah.
performance, to me, feels like their first take, like their first bite of the apple, their first like go round. And he goes like, "Oh yeah, that's great. Let's move on." And it's like, okay, but Nolan, your job as a director is to make sure all of these pieces fit together. Talked about that at the beginning of the stream about what art even is, right? We want to make sure all these things are coherent. So they all feel like they're working together to tell the story. And
We
like a
shouldn't.
good
We
director
go ahead.
is can do that and does do that. Like we talked about it before when we talked about um Marty Supreme, right? Which Safdie brother is that? Not
Josh.
Ben Safdie, because Ben Safdie is Agamemnon. It's the other
It's
one.
Josh Safdie.
Josh Safdie. He is a very talented like actors director. And any movie I watch of his, even people who aren't actors at all are giving really good performances. Like the woman in Uncut Gems who has not been in anything good ever since and is kind of a crazy person. She's really good in Uncut Gems. I think mostly
Oh,
because he's a great
Julia
director.
Fox. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the one. Yeah.
yeah.
But like so this is an
Yes.
example of something where I think
Kevin
Nolan in
Garnett.
some ways
Do you know how?
Kevin Garnett,
Do
yes.
you know how impressive it is to take an NBA player and get that kind of a performance out of them? Do you understand? Have you seen the fucking campaign mode version of Spike Lee's 2K game?
I don't think most people have.
Holy shit, dude! It like, and not that Spike Lee's a good director. You know, like we on this channel do not subscribe to the idea that Spike Lee has ever made a movie that was worth it. But you see how bad these, like, how truly bad these people can be
Yeah.
when you.
Well, we've seen The Weeknd in other movies be
Oh
awful,
my
but
god,
he's
yeah.
actually okay in Uncut Gems. Like, you know. So anyway, that's a director who can clearly like get good performances out of people, even if they're not especially great actors in other movies, and they can, you know, craft performances such that they all feel like a coherent whole. This is all to say that this is an aspect of what a director does that I actually think Nolan is not especially good at. Like far from being like one of the best of all time, I think maybe in this dimension at least, he's actually a little bit subpar.
Yes.
He's like not
Georgius Rex got me, by the way. He says these people, athletes. Professional athletes are horrible actors. There, I said it.
humanity a
You
blind
know what?
test.
You can call me whatever kind of ist you want for that. I like professional athletes are not good actors, generally speaking,
There you go.
unless
There's your Aristocats
yes.
over a black screen. This is all worth it. I realized we missed a super chat earlier, so I want to respond to it. Marconin says, "Ugh, the culture war." They said dismissively, both affirming their ascendancy and understanding the denial of such a thing was a tactical advantage from their ascendant position. Yes, I know what you mean. This is a common rhetorical move from people who take cultural war issues very seriously, but think you're kind of silly and ridiculous if you oppose them on any of them. They do this a lot.
Yes.
Now that we've seen the Aristocats, I would like to go back
You will go
to
back
just
to
Matt
yes, we'll go
Damon.
back to Matt
I don't
Damon.
want the black screen for that long. It offends my
Okay,
sensibilities.
fair enough. The chat
But
the
yes, the
chat's
cult
gonna
of
have to
Nolan.
come back in here. Yeah, the cult of Nolan. I don't know what the fuck OBS did now. Okay, yeah. OJ Simpson was a good actor. Didn't you see his murder trial? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
God, man,
true.
I was really sold that glove didn't fit. Damn. But yeah, no. Okay, so the cult of Nolan, right? Like he's not particularly good at getting solid performances out of actors. I've never seen a movie except The Dark Knight. So I'm positive this was all Heath Ledger bringing, the Joker in there, right? Except for The Dark Knight, I don't know that I've ever seen a movie of his where I was blown away by an actor's performance. Right? It's never been like the main thing from a Nolan movie is like the acting and the performance or the dialogue or anything. It's all about the spectacle. But the spectacle isn't even that spectacular, Like he shoots it in this really gritty, grimy kind of way, especially lately,
Yeah.
that I'm
The
just
lighting is usually really flat,
yeah.
honestly. Not impressed with the lighting at all. Yeah, I'm not hyper impressed with the spectacle either. Okay, but here's the bone I will throw to the people who were impressed by this movie and some of his other movies. When you're comparing them to the absolute like
Just
dredges
like
of
the slop of
Marvel
the Marvel
CGA
Cinematic
slop,
Universe.
the fact that this movie feels mostly like tactile and real, like they're in real places,
Haptic.
and it feels haptic, exactly. That is a breath of fresh air. I will give you that. Absolutely. There are things about this movie I thought looked really cool. I really like the way that we turned the men into pigs. I thought that looked pretty awesome. There are aspects of the Trojan horse thing that looked kind of neat, or I was like found like mildly compelling.
When like on the
Overall, though,
surface.
on the surface, yeah. But then ultimately, like Fringy mentioned this when we talked about it, and I totally agree. When we go around to see the rest of Troy, it feels like a rather empty set. Honestly,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a real city. I'm not greatly impressed by the spectacle in this movie. Honestly, the spectacle, I don't, I just think to the degree that Nolan is still really competent on a technical level, like we saw it a lot in Oppenheimer, but I'm not seeing it a lot here. Honestly,
Yeah, and the pig-headed insistence on shooting everything in IMAX for some reason, right? Like I don't really know what he's getting out of that, really, because like then only 40 people or like only 40 screens in the entire world can even show the real thing that you shot, right? Like the whole
yeah.
image. So it's like why are you doing that? Why are you making
I don't
like
know. The other big drawback, other than you mentioned it already, the fact that now you have to sort of compose every shot for like all aspect ratios and no aspect ratios at the same time, is that also you've got a camera from like a technical perspective that you can only shoot for like 3 minutes at a time. A lot of people have noticed that that might be a motivating factor for like the pacing of the dialogue in scenes because they have to get it all out in a
as
relatively
quickly
short
as
amount of time.
possible? Yeah.
There's that. There's the fact that it's huge and cumbersome and sort of like precludes a lot of camera movement that you might see in like a more visually impressive spectacle movie. The other thing I would say is that because it's such a large film format, like the actual sensor area of the film is massive, you know, like that basically means that the focus is going to be
It's
extremely
oh
shallow.
yeah, it's so shallow. It's quite
And I'm sick of
noticeable.
that personally. It's quite noticeable, especially in all the interior nighttime scenes. The focus is razor thin and you can like barely even see what's happening in the background. I
So
don't like
people's
that look.
noses will, like, the tip of their nose is out of
Yeah.
focus and the back of their
Yeah.
ears are out of focus, and it's like, and you can fucking tell, man. Like, it's
Yeah. It can be distracting too, especially because it doesn't seem like they did a ton of takes of a lot of these performances. So like the focus puller is like hanging on for dear life, just trying to do the best they can. And sometimes they go out a little bit. And like I don't blame them. This is like the lowest or the shallowest the depth of field can possibly be in a movie, basically. And so I don't but I don't like that look. I'm really sick of it. It's
yeah.
very trendy in modern filmmaking to have such a shallow depth of field, but I'm sick of it. I'm also kind of sick of like the rigorous, slavish adherence to naturalistic lighting. I think this is like a could be an awesome, fun, mythic like adventure story. It could have some unmotivated lighting, kind of like the Lord of the Rings, right? If it had more of that visual pizzazz, that's a spectacle that I'm actually going to be excited about. This is kind of dreary and drab from the very first trailers. I saw this, I'm like, oh, that looks like kind of miserable. Like that doesn't look fun. And I was right. The movie's not fun.
No. But
There's not a
especially
lot of
because, like,
fun.
during all of the heroic epic things that he's supposed to be doing, he's moping and pouting and apologizing, to your modern
Yeah.
audience for doing it, right? Like,
Yeah. I
you're
don't
not
care for that.
you're taking this film format that is unwieldy, is a great word for it, right? It's big,
Hmm.
it's unwieldy. It doesn't really give you any better options than a regular fucking aspect. Zack Snyder's aspect ratio that he shot everything at until, he saw the lighthouse and decided he wanted to do everything in black and white, 4:3 at that point, right? Like, that aspect ratio works better for a lot of what you're trying to accomplish here than using your big IMAX camera, right? And you don't have all of the technical restraints. But, like, then on top of all of that, you're not even letting the movie be enjoyable and fun on top of it. You're making it a miserable slog through, like, some kind of wartime guilt, right? Like, why?
The
Why
most
am
fun
I
I
why do I have
the
to
most
watch all, like, such a big version of that to get it? Do I need
Yeah,
to see that?
it's a good question. I don't really know why he loves IMAX so much or what he's getting out of it other than he just thinks this looks really good. And this is like it does feel like in many ways in terms of the types of stories he's telling and how he's shooting them, he's getting closer and closer to what he wants to be doing ultimately. And I'm liking it less and less the further we get. I really am. I think all the movies of his that I genuinely like and think are like good are his earliest stuff for the most part. I think The Prestige is his best movie. I think Following, his very first movie, is like surprisingly quite good. Um, Memento is quite good, for example, and I really like Batman Begins and everything. The further he's gone on, he's sort of like he's like approaching like the like limit of Christopher Nolan-ness. Like it's an asymptote, you know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like. And but I'm like, I don't like where this is going. The cinematography and the lighting is getting uglier as far as I'm concerned. And the types of stories you're interested in telling as you age are less and less interesting to me. There's basically no like youth or vitality in this movie at all, which is kind of crazy given the subject matter. But c'est la
Yeah.
vie. Okay,
Real quick,
I did miss
yeah,
a couple
I
super
was just
chats.
about to say.
Okay, first a while ago, and sorry we missed it earlier. What are your thoughts on One Battle After Another? Hugh still hasn't seen it because I told him he didn't
Yeah.
have to. I think it's a pretty bad movie. Um,
Uh,
I think it's like a morally repugnant movie, is what I would say. There's some things about it that are like, technically competently well made, but I think One Battle After Another is kind of morally egregious, especially in that it sort of sympathizes with um, terrorism. I don't much care for sympathizing with terrorism, uh, and lying about the state of America to sort of hopefully inspire more terrorism. Don't care for that sort of thing. I think the movie's pretty egregious morally. there is, I will admit, some fun stuff in there anyway because it's Paul Thomas Anderson and like he's a pretty talented director. He's a more talented director than Christopher Nolan, that's for certain. But yeah, it was disappointing to see that from Paul Thomas Anderson because I've quite liked many of his other movies. I think there's a couple I still haven't seen, but of the movies of his I've seen, it's my least favorite for sure. Uh, and Hugh hasn't seen it because I told him he didn't have to. Um, Mark Conan had another super chat earlier that I missed. I'm missing them left and right. Can't believe it. What's going on? I says, "Hey guys, love the show." Oh no, I actually did read that one. I didn't miss that one. I lied, but I did miss this one. If you were, this is from Crusty Jugglers. Thank you, Crusty Jugglers. We appreciate it. If you were uber big brain like Nolan, you'd realize that war bad and women and pawns with no agency. This message alone automatically makes the movie good, don't you know? Yeah, that sort of there is that through line running through the movie, and I think people who are on the more right wing or conservative side of things, saying that the movie is actually secretly based or whatever, have to ignore that through line. And there is stuff that contradicts that through line that you just mentioned. That war bad, women are pawns with no agency, all that sort of stuff. Like that is in the movie. It is undeniable. And the only way to like conclude that the movie is definitively woke or unwoke for that matter is to ignore half of what the movie is because really the movie is just kind of a mess. But it's clear, I think, from everything that Nolan says that he's a liberal and that liberalism is motivating most of these decisions. However, yeah, it is very much a war bad movie. I am sick of that personally.
Is
Not
this
that
one battle after another, or
no, this is a different super chat that I missed about, if we were uber big brain like Nolan, we'd realize that war is bad and that women's are pawns with no agency.
yes,
Um,
yes, and that
oh, and I missed one other. We missed like four super chats
holy
somehow. It's
fuck. Yeah,
crazy.
well,
Uh,
look, man, we've been having
Mark
fun.
Conan, we've been having fun, right? Says thank you for calling out ostensible liberal progressive race blind casting for what it is, race obsessed, and the obvious result of a belief system that says white people have a blood debt to pay. Yeah, I really think that's true. I think that's what's motivating a lot of it, and I definitely think, if nothing else, it's a lie to call it race blind casting. We are what we're dealing with in these movies and in these historical documentaries and all that sort of stuff is not the equivalent of like an orchestra doing blind auditions where they just hear the people play and then they like choose based on their performance without having seen them at all, so they don't know if they're a woman or black or gay or whatever. This is not what we're dealing with. First of all, because actors, part of what makes an actor right for a role is that they look like the person they're supposed to be playing. That is part of what an actor's job is. So someone who is not fitting the part, like it is not. I guess what I'm saying is someone who looks the part and someone who does not look the part are not starting from an even playing field.
Yeah,
So if you put the person who doesn't fit the part above, you're like making a conscious decision to disregard looking right for the part, which is most of the time these days an ideological uh, motivation. Fun little fun fact: a lot of orchestras in like 2014 and on, and sort of like what you might call peak woke, a lot of orchestras took up blind auditions because they're liberals and they don't want to have they just kind of assumed that the reason that most orchestras are made up of white people and men
and
specifically
Asians.
and Asians is specifically because we have a bias towards them. So they wanted to eliminate that bias, and so they started implementing blind auditions. And then the disparity got even worse. It's kind of like body cams. It's kind of like we were sure that doing this was going to be the woke thing, and it kind of did the opposite. Um, and so a lot of orchestras gave up on blind auditions for that reason because it was actually it was the opposite. That's just a fun little
Did you see
anecdote for
Markkinen's?
you.
I didn't see one battle after another, but Inherent Vice is one of my favorite movies of all time. So fucking funny. Yeah, I haven't seen Inherent Vice. I, you
I
know,
didn't see that one, but
I'm
because
interested. I like Joaquin Phoenix.
because I like a lot of his movies, but I remember
Maybe.
hearing that that one was kind of like scatterbrained and all over the place, and I
Yeah,
heard that, and that was a turnoff for me. But
Thomas Pynchon
me-
novels, that which is what that's based on, right? Are like those are the ones that you'll hear a lot of English majors talk about them being like works of genius. Then you'll read them and you're like, ooh, like that's dense. I don't know what I'm getting from it. Like they're not particularly readable and accessible things, right? You've really got to work to get what like out of that. And that's always kind of put me off a little bit about that movie, is because I know that it's based on one of his novels, and I'm just a little bit like, I don't know, it might be too big brain for me. Um, I'm a simple
yeah,
man.
yeah. I'll give it a shot at some point because I genuinely do like. I mean, There Will Be Blood is a great movie. I like
Fucking love, dude. There Will
Boogie
Be Blood is
Nights.
so goddamn good.
I like Magnolia. You don't like it quite as much as I do, but I think The Master is really solid.
I have to rewatch it because I think I might have just been not in the mood for it at the time.
Fair. It
I've seen,
happens.
yeah, because I've seen other scenes of it like since then, right, on Instagram reels. I'm like, fuck, that's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I might have just been like in a weird, not ready to, or in the mood to watch the movie. I think I just kind of was like, oh, I'm bored. I'm gonna turn on The Master, and like it
Yeah.
probably
It's
wasn't.
in a it's not a movie for every mood, that's for sure. It's a it's a dry it's a dry wine kind of thing, that movie. Anyway, we're all
Okay,
caught
well,
up. We
the
were
Wes,
talking about
real
the
quick,
cult
Wes
of
just
Nolan.
like shat on my view of that one. Inherent Vice is apparently one of Pynchon's most readable novels, so yeah, maybe I will check that out at some point. That it's good to hear, because I tried with some of it. I think I tried with Gravity's Rainbow, and I was just like, hey man, if- I don't know.
The Thing says There Will Be Blood would be better if not for that weak sauce actor. Oof. You know what's really funny about that? I saw recently, I mentioned it on Twitter, but I saw people were sharing some of the things that Jean-Luc Godard has said about other filmmakers, and he's very critical of a lot of people and said so publicly. And then someone else shared in response of all the very critical things that other directors have said about his work. And I was having fun reading both, right? Because I like this sort of thing. And it just sort of hit me that, and I'm going to assume that there is a causal relationship here, whether there is evidence for it or not, but it's certainly true that movies were better when directors felt like they could criticize each other publicly.
Yes.
That is a statement of fact at this point, and I believe that they are causally related. I think I think artists need to, because at any basically any time in history, artists were also doing cultural criticism, and now we've kind of cleaved those things in two, where now basically the only person who's doing movie reviews as a filmmaker is Quentin Tarantino, and everyone yells at him for it. But I like it, even if I don't agree with him. I'm glad he's out there sharing his capital O opinions. Look at that. We said the channel name in the stream.
Yeah.
We did it.
Get
Um,
get out there, Quentin. Keep talking shit on Paul Dano.
yeah, why
Not
not?
because
It's
I
funny.
agree, but because it's funny.
Yeah, like I don't
Maybe
know.
he was just
Like
jealous that Paul got to sing that song in 12 Years a Slave, and he didn't.
this is not how this was supposed to go. Anyway, bring it back. Be mean to other artists' work in public. Be harsh. Be critical. It's fun, man.
Yeah,
Someone needs
let's
to
do
be
it.
more critical of not Quentin Tarantino, of Christopher Nolan, please, because he has built up quite a cult following. I thought for sure, based on the trailer, that this movie would help knock that down a peg. It did not. Not really. If anything, it's bigger than ever. I'm like, oh, great. Never gonna have to deal with more of his work. I will say, I was one of these people who kind of lowballed the estimate of how financially successful this movie would do. That was kind of dumb of me. I did not expect it to make a billion because none of his other non-Batman movies had made a billion, but it did make a billion, and a lot of people like it. Now, I've watched a lot of reviews for this movie in preparation for this conversation. Some from I would say more thoughtful people, and some from people like Cosmonaut Variety Hour. Um, and I found a lot of the people who really liked the movie in a sort of non-political or non like culture war sense. They just liked the movie and thought it was good. Um, Entirely unable to say anything of substance about why it's good. And I don't
Oh
like, there
yeah.
are people who are saying things of substance about why they think the movie is good, but the non-political ones are just like, wow, man, this movie had the sauce. Wow, it was so cool and epic. Like, I'm exaggerating a little bit,
That
but I listened to Cosmonaut Variety Hour's video on this movie, and it just drove me crazy how like his brain just cannot think things. So, for example, right?
friend of the pod.
He friend of the pod, Cosmonaut Variety
Cosmonaut
Hour.
Variety Hour, friend of the
He
pod.
says he calls anyone. He's like, now, like I don't really care about historical accuracy criticisms because I'm not a sewer person. I'm a normal person. However, I must say that the dialogue was kind of distracting at some points, but that's fine. And I'm just like, dude, let's pull that apart for
What
just a minute.
what are you saying?
We're gonna
Yeah.
pull that apart. If you were distracted by all the visual historical anachronisms, or even the sort of like the general ethos of the movie not being um, that of the ancient world in the slightest, you're a sewer person, you're essentially less than human. Normal people don't care about those things, obviously. But obviously, he did notice that the dialogue being very modern, a historical anachronism, he noticed that. So, of course, he's normal for having noticed that. He's not a sewer person, but he's only normal. You're only allowed to notice problems like that if you think, it's fine. Like, it's not a problem, really. Like, he
Well,
also
it is
point,
distracting, but not distracting enough for me to say that everybody's sacred cow shouldn't be, should be slaughtered. Yeah,
well, the
it's
other
fine.
example, he seemed to also notice that actors in this movie feel like they're in different movies. Matt Damon is doing a very restrained, sort of stoic, simple performance, we'll
Dude,
say.
I hate it. This
Beige.
is a little bit of a side note that I like. I hate it when people tell me, "Oh yeah, character trait stoic." Like, that's not. That's
Yeah, so Matt Damon is giving his performance in this movie, which is very, um, it's not very big. It's kind of small. It's very interior. He's not doing a whole. He's not going. He's not going crazy. You know who is going a bit more crazy is someone like Robert Pattinson, and you
yeah,
know
Robert
who's like,
Pattinson cooking
who's
those
really
lines.
kind of like hamming it up in a way, like they're clearly like thinking, this is the Oscars moment. Is Anne Hathaway, for example. Cosmonaut notices and even says that it feels like some of these actors are not, or that are in different movies, but then he just does not go on to say that that's a problem. He's like, like Anne Hathaway feels like she's in a totally different movie, but in a way like that's good. And I'm like, dude, how? How is it good? Like, he doesn't elaborate, and it's just like, dude, it drives me crazy. It drives me
It's
crazy.
good because
Like,
he agrees that women should be president.
it's good. What I got from his video especially was just he liked the movie, and so these are all just kind of a grab bag of like post hoc rationalizations for why he liked the movie, not like any actual thinking about it. He's
But
just
like
like,
he's
oh
he's
man.
trying. He's starting to. He's like he's thinking about it because he's saying the things, right? He's just like, I really liked it. As I'm thinking more about it, the
Yeah,
actors didn't
yeah.
really feel congruent, and like I could tell that they were all kind of not in the same on the same page,
Oh,
and
he
in
even said,
particular there's people who
he,
are overacting, and like
oh my gosh, he
I didn't
even
like the
said that
dialogue.
it doesn't feel like we're in like a real place. It feels like we're watching a bunch of actors put on like a stage play, like a bunch of
Is
modern
that
people.
praised?
Yeah, but he's like, but like in a way that like I think that's the more interesting choice, and it's like, oh, dude, drives me crazy. So there's that level of criticism where it's just like they liked the movie, and then they'll just grab any set of arguments, even if they don't fit, even if it doesn't make any. We're good, and anything I noticed that did kind of take me out of it, that wasn't really a problem.
Let
you
me
know
find a reason why I could say that, like, well, yeah, it took me out of it, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's why I liked it. It's like
Yeah.
it's
So
gaslighting yourself.
there's that level of cultural criticism. Then, uh, okay, so we're gonna stick with like broadly speaking the left here, right? So cosmonaut, he's kind of a liberal type person, and in that he thinks you're a stupid sewer person chud if you care about things like historical accuracy, but he's not really interpreting it as like a deeper thing about our culture right now so much. He's just like, oh, that was a cool movie. Then there are people like Ezra Klein, who I don't know who he works for now, but he's
Was
a
he
journalist.
NPR?
Maybe he was, I don't remember. But anyway, I watched his video review of the movie, and he is a liberal. He is 100% convinced that this is like, oh, a perfect, awesome allegory for like why Trump is destroying America kind of thing. Like, he is interpreting this movie as like perfectly in keeping with his like liberal
What?
sort of Democrat worldview, where it's like, people like Trump are the people that are breaking the world, etc. He has this video. It has like 500,000 views. A lot of people in the comments are like, "Oh, this is some of your best work," right? So they're all seeing it that way. Where like this is obviously kind of like an anti-Trump, like Agamemnon. He's like a Trump type character. I've seen
Ah.
normal, like multiple people say stuff like that, right? You know, so
Oh,
they're
dude, that's
interpreting it
crazy
that
because I
way.
didn't think so. I did overhear. I told you about this. I was having lunch the other day outside of my office, and I overheard a couple of people who had just come out of the movie theater by the spot I was eating talking about the Odyssey and saying there was some stuff in there about Trump, and it was like one of them goes, like, pro Trump, and the other one goes, no, of course not. And then when I went to see it, I was like, are they talking? What the fuck are they talking about? Are they talking about the draft dodger thing? Draft dodging is bad, but also Vietnam was immoral. Is that what they're getting at? Because I did like Agamemnon's whole
See,
thing was
here's
like
what,
about trade routes. If you were gonna make
but he
like
was evil, and
he
he
was
was like,
evil and he was a king,
yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I didn't even think about that on because like if you were gonna say like if you were gonna turn the Agamemnon character into a critique of Donald Trump, wouldn't you want to do it more like they do in Troy, where he's like kind of a greedy imperialist, impatient, impetuous asshole? Like, isn't it? Wouldn't you kind of want to do it more like that? Like that.
You would think so, but Hugh, your problem is that you're like looking at all the details of the story. You gotta only look at the parts that serve what you already want to believe, right? And what you already want to believe is that this is like a movie that like perfectly, just perfectly, like confirms all your like
Right.
liberal
Sorry.
values. And there's a way that that's kind of true about the movie, kind of, right? But like you have to ignore a lot of it to. But like that is what, and I guess I bring this up to mention that there are people on the right who think, and Jonathan Pajot is one of them, which frustrates me because he's a very smart guy otherwise. But his whole thing is like, you see all that stuff with the casting and all the other things that they did in the marketing that made it seem like it was going to be a bunch of woke nonsense. Ultimately, those things had like a really small effect on the actual story, which is about, like overcoming like the things you've done wrong and like reclaiming your place. It's a story about the return of the king and setting things right and like punishing the evildoers who are threatening your family and reinstituting order. Those things are all kind of fundamentally more, I guess you could say, conservative if you squint, right?
Well,
And
the
he
the
looks at that
values of the
going,
hero have been lost.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so he's got to like bring them back and return his rightful place as, king, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. I'm reducing his argument a bit. He goes into more specific detail, but basically his argument is that all the stuff that doesn't fit, that all the stuff that's very obviously liberal, very obviously sort of leftist oriented, very modern, very not actually very Christian, all that sort of stuff, that's all like surface level details to trick you. Like his actual argument is that this movie is a really clever trick, like a Trojan horse itself, wherein all that surface level detail is designed to lull the sort of like person who likes that sort of thing into like a false sense of security so you can give them a story that's actually about the rightful return of the masculine patriarch, right? Like that's his argument, and I'm like, first, I just think you're attributing too much intention here. Nolan, from all available accounts and how he talks about this movie, just believes in a lot of those things that you think are just a trick, right? He also tried to argue, Jonathan Pajot did, that um, basically Nolan has made movies about tricksters many times, right? Obviously, Batman is kind of a trickster character in a way, and the Joker as well. And also in Inception, it's about planting ideas in people's subconscious. And obviously, The Prestige is very much about trickery and deception
Yeah.
and illusion and all that sort of stuff. So clearly, that means that this movie is actually kind of like there's a hidden meaning, there's a surface level meaning, and then there's the real kind of hidden meaning underneath, and there's like a little bit of a trick happening, and it's actually really clever. And I just don't buy that at all. What do you make of that before I keep rambling? What do you make of
That
that argument?
that reminds me very much of that the person I spoke to at my office who told me that Sinners was a fantastic movie and a triumph, not because the movie itself is good, but because despite Coogler's best efforts to be sort of anti-America, anti-Christian, it ends up having a very Christian imagery and meaning, so therefore it's a triumph for God, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, you know, okay, like if that's what you're, I feel like all the evidence is pointing to the fact that Christopher Nolan did not intend for any of that to be the case, right? And anything
Yes.
that he did that you are getting from that is entirely accidental based on the fact that it is an adaptation of a source material that has something like that to say, right?
Yes. As Emily Wilson said that like he couldn't make it totally boring because the original is just that good, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's that's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I feel like especially that Chinese interview that he did, right, with Billy or whatever. That was eye-opening.
wait, wait, was her name Billy Billy?
No, that's the channel name, I think, or like
Oh,
the
okay. I
media
thought you
company
were
name.
saying her name was Billy Billy. Never mind.
No.
Continue.
Like, and credit to her because she seems like she actually, God, it was so refreshing. Because there have been a couple messages in the chat about this as well, right? Where like most of the interviews that people for this movie give, right? Even on Hot Ones, which people praise as being, you know, better questions than your usual talk show,
Fair.
Jimmy
Yeah.
Kimmel, fare, right? Those are all so innocuous and more like, how fun was it to work with Christopher Nolan? How excited were you that you got to have all these great actors and shoot this story? Are you really looking forward to the premiere of this movie and the discourse around it? It's all softball questions that have nothing to do with the substance of the film, right? And
Yeah.
then this person comes along and is asking him legitimate questions, just like, do you think that you are telling this story for a civilization at dusk? Like, do
Yeah.
you think that you Christianized the Odyssey by adding in the elements of
Golden
redemption
Rule,
and
Atonement.
atonement? You are
Really quick.
decidedly modern in your interpretation. Why do you think you decided? Why do you think you did that? Why do you think you decided to ignore all of the textual stuff about the source and do your own thing? Right? Like
Yeah.
it was very in like she was it was almost like she was trying to get to the bottom of it, right? And his like
Yeah.
he clearly wasn't prepared. His answers kind of ramble and like
You know what's
he
funny about one of his answers? She asked about the Christianizing thing and mentions like redemption and atonement. And basically, in so many words, he's like, yeah, he goes off into exile, but like that doesn't mean that there's atonement. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
so from his perspective, he's telling a story about a guy who feels really guilty for having like sinned and broken the world, and he tries to like make up for it, but even in his logic, his interpretation of the movie is that like ultimately there's nothing you can do to fix it, you just kind of have to do the best you can. So it's like he doesn't even really believe in the possibility of redemption. Like that doesn't feel that doesn't feel very Christian to me. I must say, like when you hear his answers to these questions, it's just like, I mean, for example, that he I think, but the problem is like Jonathan Pajot's interpretation where like this is like a clever trick or something like that. He's taking what Christopher Nolan says about how liberal audiences won't accept greatness, without apologizing for it, as like evidence that like he kind of takes that at face value, whereas I hear that I'm like, that's bullshit. Like you don't really believe that. You're passing the buck to the audience when clearly this is what you believe because this is the subject of basically every one of your movies to varying degrees. Like I don't believe that Christopher Nolan is a secret right winger conspiracy theory. I
No,
don't
well, and
believe it.
especially after listening to him having to explain his choices, right? Because like
Yeah.
nobody had made him do that until this interview with the Chinese interviewer, right? Nobody had sat him down and made him answer for the things that he decided to do for this movie. And when he starts trying to do it, you start to realize you're like, no, that's not what he was trying to do at all. That's not what he's doing in this movie. It's
No.
not there. And our noticing of the lack of that kind of thing,
Hmm.
like that's more accurate than you claiming that no, actually secretly the movie was this. It is the same thing as like saying, well, even if his intention was to be incredibly anti-Christian and to blow up the idea of integration of culture, Sinners was a triumph because God eventually, like, because it has a very Christian message, and just by nature of the fact that it's a vampire story, right? That like the good and the light conquer the dark and the evil, right? By the nature of that, that means that it was an achievement for God, and it's a very
Kind
deeply
of
Christian Catholic
tortured
movie.
reasoning.
It's a
Yeah.
torture, yeah, it's a very tortured way of pulling something of value out of it. That's what that feels like what he's doing a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
so I'll give a more specific example to like sort of under because like yes, the movie does end with Odysseus returning home, killing the interlopers who are like threatening his family and abusing his wife's hospitality, and like returns order and justice in a sense imperfectly as the movie executes it to Ithaca and to society, right? So it is kind of a return of the king story, except that then he goes and fucks off into exile because really the ending is more like the Dark Knight in that it's like a scapegoat story, where like, he takes the sins upon himself and then fucks off into the desert, right? To be like, because Christopher Nolan is very interested in this scapegoat. It shows up in a lot of his movies, right? Like this kind of idea of like taking, like this part of like Jesus's story, right? Of like taking the sins upon himself, right? But it doesn't have the full picture.
well, because he's
It's
doing
just
it in a very enlightenment liberal kind of way, which is,
yeah.
when you
And so
really
like
go get down to it, just a Christian heresy, right? Like,
yeah, I mean fundamentally I believe that liberalism is basically a Christian heresy. Like that's why it seems like we've Christianized the Odyssey with this movie, because it does look a little bit more like Christianity than it does like pagan, ancient Greece. But it's not. It's like post-Christian, I guess you could argue in a
it's
sense.
repackaging Christian values for a secular audience, right? Like that's
Kind of,
what
yeah,
it's
and
trying to
omitting
do.
kind of by like omitting half the story. So basically what we end up with is not exactly the triumphant return where he reclaims his place on the throne. It's that like no, he's sinned too much by by what he did in the Trojan War to actually like return to the throne. He's kind of like too impure now that he has to like he has to break Zeus's law one more time and kill these suitors and then take that sin upon himself. Make sure his son doesn't participate in killing the suitors because he needs to be pure. And so then I will take all the sins upon myself and I will go fuck off on a cruise with my wife into into the
I'm
west
going on a
to go
literal
die.
Viking cruise because we didn't give the ship back yet.
Yes. So, like, that is not exactly the triumphant return of the king story that is already present in the Odyssey. But to the degree that some of those notes are still there, it's because he didn't change everything about the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's kind of how I see the whole picture here. Is like, yeah, like, some people will be like, oh, well, like, obviously, like, we kill all the suitors and they were bad. And so it is kind of like justice at the end. It's like, yeah, yeah, except like I can't help but notice who were allowed to take satisfaction in killing and who were not. Like that there's an ideological thing happening there. The
Well,
same thing with the feminism we talked about earlier. And I it just when you actually take it all in view at the same time, it's only like partially that, and that's why. And so the other thing that I think cuts against the idea that this is actually like, this is a Trojan horse. On the surface it seems like it's got a whole bunch of leftist ideological stuff on top of it, but really underneath is the core story about family or whatever. And this is a Trojan horse to get people who wouldn't normally accept a story like that to accept it. Like, if that's the argument, then why are so many people just hook, line, and sinker buying into that? Like, Ezra Klein, this is a message about how Trump and all the people who are attacking liberalism are bad and they're destroying the world, and we need to
Yeah, well, and I
bring
mean,
back.
like, it's funny, right? Because one of the things that you could easily read into it instead, right, is that the golden age heroic values are lost, and as a result, our homeland is flooded with suitors, ill-meaning suitors who want to
Taking
inherit,
advantage of our
taking
hospitality.
advantage of
Yes.
our hospitality and eating us out of house and home to the point that it's become dire. And the only solution is to bring back our ancient values and kill them all and get them out of here. You could easily read that into it and make it, right wing instead, right? But like, this movie very clearly isn't saying that. I feel like
Oh,
we
and
know.
partly, like, you can tell it's not saying that really, or at least not intending to. And the fact that the suitors are not, they're not foreigners. They're the young men of the tribe, and like, and they're the only ones we're allowed to like feel
Does Mia Goth
satisfaction
get
for killing.
killed? I can't, because Jay Jameson asked, "What
No,
about the maidservants? Does she get
no, we
killed?"
don't see. We see her get left to be killed, but we don't see it happen, which is another kind of cowardly choice. We see Penelope decide, because she was sleeping with Antinous or whatever, and like helping him and feeding him information and all that sort of stuff, betraying the sort of loyalty to her house. She's left in the room. She's like not allowed to escape, right? But as far as I remember, we don't see her get killed,
Okay,
which
yeah,
is like another choice. Like,
another choice where we've like essentially, visually, she's escaped accountability, even if you can
oh,
infer.
I wanted to remind myself exactly what Ezra Klein was saying about it, just so I'm not just gesturing vaguely at their interpretation. The video is called Christopher Nolan's Finest Trick, and in the description says the Odyssey is the political movie of the decade. And I think the thumbnail describes it as a MAGA X-ray. So like, this is like the level of criticism we're talking about here.
What does any of that mean?
Hold on, I'll read a little bit so you can get a sense, right? Um, do, 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 do. He's talking about tricksters, right? Tricksters, they represent a tension every culture has to grapple with, because a culture, a society that cannot meet disruption and change with creativity, cannot survive change. A culture that cannot protect its core values, however, will eventually be consumed by corruption. We are living in an age of chaos. We are living in an age of tricksters. Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson and Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and Bronze Age pervert. The grammar of the modern right is tricksy. What is serious and what is not. The chainsaw for bureaucracy. I was blah blah blah. Sorry, that's something he's showing a clip from. And he says, "Why did they say that, and how did they get away with it?" So basically, he is seeing everything he hates about the right in the villains of this movie, basically, and he thinks it's like, this is like a deep cultural critique
Got
of
it.
all the forces that are trying to destroy our sacred liberalism, right? And how we need to come together to make sure they don't do that. That's what he's getting from the movie. That is what the nearly 500,000 people watching this video seem to be getting from the movie. I read the comments and they're all pretty positive. They're all like, "Wow, this is insightful. This is a masterpiece. You hit a home run with this one." So, are those did I guess my question to the people who think this movie was secretly like right wing and based or whatever is like, did the trick work if no one seems to be picking up on it? If you're hidden, if you have the real interpretation of the movie as like a hidden awesome like thing that's like wholesome and Christian and right wing and all that sort of fun stuff, if no one else is getting that,
Yeah.
did it
Did
work?
it work? If
Was
everybody who
the
went to
movie
see it,
successful?
thinks it did the exact opposite, did did it?
Did
Is
it
it really
work?
working? I actually
Yeah, so
did
here,
say the same thing when when the person at my office was talking about Sinners, right? I was like, so if everybody who made that movie successful thought it was successful because of the opposite, of what you're saying, right? Because it did the exact opposite of everything you're saying. Did it really triumph? Is it really a victory? And the answer was like,
Yeah,
well, of course, because God had a hand in it. And I'm like, all right, yeah, yep, all right.
I so
Take your
here's
win,
the
take your victory if that's what you want, I guess.
here's the question as far as I'm concerned. This is in the question I put in the description of this video is like what is the quality of the conversation surrounding the movie and everyone's conflicting myriad interpretations of it say about the quality of the film itself? Does it say that the movie was like a work of genius that everyone is seeing whatever they want to in it, or is it because the movie is a mess of contradictions that people can pull anything they want out of it? Like is it is it a true brilliant work of art that everyone is seeing completely different things in it and everyone is viewing it as like a confirmation of what they believed going into it? Does that make the movie good, or is that a sign that the movie is kind of like the entrails of a chicken that everyone is reading their fortunes into? You know what I mean? I am inclined to think it's more the latter, like Barbie, where people can, by ignoring many of the details in the story that contradict it, get whatever message they want out of it, because this is like, this movie contains multitudes in the worst way, where it's like it contains this and the opposite of that. And so, which is it? It's like, well, the movie's just kind of confused, I think, thematically, symbolically confused.
Yeah. Well, and like, yeah, because even what did he say, that like a society that can't meet its challenges with creativity and innovation, like
Is
that
going to
is
like
going
descend into corruption and collapse or
descendant.
something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So the Greek society that met the challenge of the Trojan War with innovation and creativity by making a horse and playing a trick. That bit that the movie clearly tells you brought the age of bronze that they were all aware of living in crumbling to the ground. How does that square, Ezra?
His conclusion in the video, to be specific, says Nolan's Odyssey is not a trickster. He's a man living in the ruins brought about by tricksters. So too are we. This movie, the hunger for it, I think, is a sign that the age of the trickster is ending. That is not what we need now. What we need now, we need those who would remake this world, right? And by remake this world, he means
In the
like
Marxist kind of way, yeah.
no, I think he means like shore up the foundations of liberalism because it's clearly under attack right now. Like that's how he's viewing it. Like I watched his whole video. It's it's less a sort of like far lefty video and more like a liberal who's
Right.
trying to hold on to like
So I
a
used
world
to
that's
like
going to.
I used to do transcription for him at NPR, and I just like I don't know. I feel like he's probably a
I mean,
lot
maybe
farther
I don't know
left
how
than
honest he is, but at
yeah.
least in the video, he's presenting it like, oh, liberalism is under attack from those mean Republicans, and that's what the Odyssey is about. And everyone's like, oh man, that's so true. Like, but yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that whatever Nolan was intending the message to be, not that it had to be a perfectly didactic, like, if you don't believe this, then you watch the movie wrong. But whatever he intended to say with the movie, even in an abstract sense, I don't think he succeeded.
No.
I don't think the movie. I don't think you could describe this movie as a success because fundamentally, like if it's not about communicating meaning to an audience, what is it about? You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
that like I don't want that to be confused with something reductive like every story has like a very explicit political moral and that's what conveying meaning is, but I just mean like the whole point of the work of narrative art and visual and sonic art is to create something that communicates meaning to people. And if everyone is taking different meanings from it, hostile and antagonistic meanings to each other from it, and there's not a lot of overlap, does that say anything good about the quality of the movie? I don't think so.
I I'm inclined to agree. The T Pro 2026 says, I guess interpretation matters. I don't see the Trojan horse as a trick, but a tactic. Tricksters like Loki in Norse mythology present chaos, something to be aware of at all times, breaking status quo. Yeah, okay, so Yes,
It's a tricky
it's a
tactic,
tricky
though, you know?
tactic, right? Like it is taking advantage of, of it's an ambush tactic basically, right? Like it is
Yeah,
kind
and
of trying to
it relies on them, like, thinking this is a gesture and goodwill,
yeah.
or
Now
and it
maybe
isn't.
describing him as a trickster overall would be like maybe we're
Maybe an
not maybe
exaggeration,
like
but
maybe
not a
it's an
lot.
exaggeration, maybe we're not really getting into the
He's not a
real
full
meaning of
Loki
like
figure.
yeah, he's not a full Loki figure. He's not like a trickster like Brer Rabbit, in the stories from Uncle Remus and everything, right? But
But he has a lot of
he
things in
does
common.
yeah, he is more of like a witty he's a witty tactician, and he is constantly looking for angles and ways to make situations work out in his favor, even if it means by lying, right? So like in that sense, um, trickster I feel like is relatively appropriate. I would yeah. Like Athena is very similar, right? Like she has
Oh,
that sort of attitude.
I know
So
we're
what were you gonna say?
I know we're talking broad strokes now, but I wanna zoom back in for a moment to complain about a fine detail in the movie.
Let's
One of
go.
them
I do have a couple of those that I still want to talk
Yeah,
about before we're
yeah,
done.
so we should get those out of the way because, maybe we're coming to the end of this here. But, for example, okay, we present the Trojan horse in this movie as a gift to the god of Athena, a god they share in common, which is supposed to be part of the logic for why it was so horrific to trick them in this way and deceive them and slaughter the priests of Athena, etc. When we're killing all the people in Troy after deceiving them with this trick, the people who worship the god of Athena, that is like the Greeks, the Ithacans or whatever, they chop off the head of the Athena statue. Why? Why did they do that if they worship the same god? Why is that in here? That doesn't make any character mode, like that doesn't make sense. Like I
Yeah,
understand why they're killing all of them, they're slaughtering them, whatever. It's ancient warfare, it's brutal. But then they also take on the like ISIS move of destroying the sort of like monuments and statues of the Trojans. But the whole premise here is that they worship the same gods as you, and that's a statue of the god you have in common. Why did they do that
yeah.
with a
It
sword? Why and how do you cut off the statue of a stone, like a stone statue's head with a sword? Setting that aside, even.
yeah, and like I don't know, man. It's weird because I'm not super familiar. So the siege of I haven't read the Aeneid, right? The siege of Troy is not described in the Iliad or the Odyssey. It's in one of the parts of Homer's cycle of epics that was lost, right? So we don't like everything we get from it comes from other sources written much later. I don't know what and like I'm not familiar enough with ancient history really to know what is and isn't common, but it is weird, right? Like I know that they sacked Troy even though Troy is in a sense like they are sort of also Greeks, right? They are favored by the Greek gods in the poems, and you know in the poems the gods are playing out the war with the people and like kind of fighting each other as a result, right? Like they'll jump from one side to another every now and then, and like Ares will take over the body of Hector and he'll kill a bunch of people as Hector, right? And like he's getting his bloodlust out, but then Athena does something similar on the other side of the line. I just don't in this context, in this version, it just doesn't make any sense. Like I don't get it. Why would that be? Yeah,
Good
why would that
question.
happen? I just don't get it. Like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any more specific things you wanted to complain about
There were a
since
couple of specific things I wanted to complain about. Well, the most specific one is Elliot Page.
Yeah, let's talk
um,
about that.
yeah, let's talk about that. So first of all, still acts like a chick. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah, not convincing as a
not
man in the
convincing as a
movie at
man
all.
at all. So like I know we're all pretending. Now, you still the look in Hades that he gives or she gives to Matt Damon as she's walking away and is just like, make sure you bury me. Or like make sure you bury. No, no, because that's the other guy, right? It's just like make sure you bury him and make sure you tell my father, like bring my lot back to Antinous, right? It's so feminine. It's very, very
Yeah,
feminine. It's like all of the body language is incredibly feminine. But
the way she runs towards the horse is also pretty funny.
yeah.
Everyone was mocking that, rightly so. It was very funny.
So, okay, the main thing that I wanted to complain about with this though, right, is that like having this bit be your so the movie we've already pretty well established is vehemently anti-war. Very anti-war movie. Now,
Yes.
in the original poem, when they go to Hades and visit all of the ghosts, one of the shades that they meet is Achilles, the great hero and honor like the crazy honorable, like, you went down in a blaze of glory kind of guy, right? Like the man for, war fighting, right?
Yeah.
And he tells Odysseus when Odysseus basically says like, "Hey man, at least you went down fighting, right? At least you got all the glory and everything." He tells Odysseus, "I would rather be a slave or like a lowly farmer and alive than dead as a war hero." Right? That is in the source material. You imagine that would have been rather shocking at the time, right? Like that would have been
Yes.
some going against convention, right?
Yeah.
Why would you not include that part in your anti-war movie? Why would you
Bec
deliberately cut that bit out for a
Good
part
question.
that does
We're
not happen?
we're instead we're going to replace Achilles with a character who has been mentioned. Many people have pointed out is not even from the Odyssey. It's from the Aeneid, Sinon, or whatever. And also, we're going to change it so that he the character he is in the Aeneid was like a tricky spy who like deceived the Trojans, was in on the ruse and helped convince them that this was an offering made in peace to make up for, the battles that they've waged already, and say, here, have this horse, and we're all good. Like that's part of the deception. The character is in on the ruse. In this movie, we make it such that Sinon is not in on the ruse because we want it to be a betrayal that Odysseus doesn't tell Sinon that they're like what their plan is. First of all, it doesn't make any fucking sense how Sinon just didn't happen to notice that they all climbed inside the
Why
horse.
lie to?
You know,
Well, how did he not notice, and why lie to him in the first place? What does that accomplish at all?
well, it doesn't. His logic in the movie is that like, oh, I needed it to be believable, and it's like, well, in the source material, Sinan is just a character who would lie for the cause. You choosing to make it someone who can't be trusted to lie for the cause is an interesting choice. But now it's a betrayal because when he goes down into Hades, Sinan is mad. Now Sinan is mad, like I can't believe you didn't tell me, and it's like, sorry, I needed it to be real, and it's like you. I don't know, man. You're all there to wage war. You think you would just leave it with someone who is willing to die for the cause or risk dying for the cause in order to just be in on
Yeah,
the ruse. It just doesn't make any
it doesn't.
sense.
Like it does also kind of beg the question, like when Sinon saw them putting this incredibly ornate horse together on the beach, like did she do like the Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber and just walk on like, "Hey, big horse, huh? Well, see you later," and then just walk away? Is that is
Uh,
that how it went down? Like, okay,
I don't know, man.
there have been a lot of people who have complained about the design of the horse. This is another thing that I want to complain about. It's way too ornate. First of all, like it doesn't look believable that they could have built that from scraps that they pulled off of the beach or off of their ships. I don't buy it. It was made to sell popcorn buckets.
Yeah,
On the
it's
surface,
too
it's like,
nice
oh, it
as
looks really
well.
cool, but it doesn't make any sense. Especially if the plan is, oh, we're gonna get them to drag it up, right? Like it
We're
doesn't
gonna
have.
leave it near the
We're
water
gonna
so that
bury it,
we
half
might
bury
drown
it
in
in the
it.
sand, so we might drown in it, right? And
Yeah.
then leave it near the. I did not know this, right? But when you watch Platoon's second video, he points out the tide in the Mediterranean is like an 8-inch fluctuation.
Yeah. So
Like
they buried it in half in the sand
it is
just so
often
they can
known as the
almost
tideless
drown.
sea, apparently. So they
Yeah,
buried
but
it in
you
such
expect
a
Nolan
place.
to know that? You expect him to know these things about the
Hey man,
place
it's
where
not
he's
a
setting
movie
his
about
story?
ancient Greece, you know? It's about
So shut up.
yeah, fuck it. It's about modern America and Vietnam.
He's just his relationship to realism is just so like perverted is the word that keeps coming to mind, where he's just like, no, it wouldn't make any sense that they would accept the GIF if it was like presented on wheels. I need to have it like be like a thing they abandoned, because that's the only way they would believe that it wasn't a trap. Haha. And it's like, why would they believe that it was a gift left for them if they like half buried it in the sand? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
that's not
that
the way
doesn't
they go about it is not very realistic, but like he's convinced the same way he's convinced that the pun, the nobody pun, simply won't play. He's convinced, oh, if they just wheel it up to the gate, surely there's no way they would think that's a like an actual gift. And it's like, why not? That's what happens in the story.
yeah. Like well,
And
yeah,
it's
that was his
weird
excuse, right?
arrogance.
Is he was just like, well, we all know that that's how the story goes, right? But like
Did he say that explicitly?
yes, he did. He was like
Oh
nobody
God.
would believe that
It's like,
because
yes, they would, they did, and that's the whole point.
we all know that a Trojan horse is full of Greeks, is what he said, and
Did
it
he
begged.
actually say that?
Yes, he did.
It
Did you?
doesn't feel
I
real.
think you have to watch. Dude, you have to watch Platoon's second video because he said
I
that.
did watch the second video, but I don't remember him
It's
saying
either
that.
that.
Maybe
It's
I just
either in that, in there, or in the first one. He says that in an interview, and Platoon goes off on him. It's just like we
yeah.
know that because it
I
was
guess
successful. They
it just doesn't
wouldn't.
feel like any human being would have actually made that argument. Maybe other than like a cosmonaut variety hour type. Um,
Yeah, they
I
wouldn't
don't know why
suspect it
he's
because
getting so
yeah.
much shade, but his video is just so bad, guys. Anyway,
Also, there was an interesting question that I would like to ask, right? Because Wes in the chat says, "Wait, why does this film think Sinon is in Hades again?" Now, that is an interesting question, specifically because like, even though the gods, you know, we don't really believe in the gods, and we believe the gods have abandoned, you know, the people who are taking part in this story, right? We are going to explore the afterlife in Hades,
yeah.
but it is not really explicitly spelled out whether or not this is like just the only place that people go, or is this he doesn't want to get into the actual mythology of it, and I'm not familiar enough with it to be able to speak too deeply on it, right? But it is a rather miserable existence based on what we're
Yes.
seeing, right?
Yeah.
So you would expect that it's like kind of off-putting, but he doesn't
Yeah,
really
but
want to address the fact that this like he doesn't want to address the fact that this could be considered like a hellscape or something like that. It's just like as far as the movie's concerned, this is just where dead soldiers go. Is here. And
yeah.
in the poem, his like Odysseus encounters his mother in the afterlife,
As
which is
well as
how he
Achilles,
as well
like
as
a great
Achilles.
warrior. So
So
yeah.
yeah, like, and he finds out that his mother died waiting for him, and that his father's still alive. There, and he sees Sisyphus pushing the rock. He sees all of those great myths and everything like that. But the movie doesn't really want to do any establishment of what this means and what this place means.
Yeah, it just
Um,
kind of takes at face value the fact that this is just the afterlife. It's not a hell opposite a heaven, but part of the problem is because we've modernized so much. I think I wouldn't I would forgive a modern audience member for thinking that they're basically in hell. And it's like, oh, why is this person in hell if they didn't do anything wrong? Because you know what I mean? Because
yeah,
like that's the sort of modern, vaguely Christian ethic we have. Like the
yeah,
Greek
okay.
afterlife is weird by modern standards,
This
you
may
know?
okay. This is interesting, right? Because Hades is the underworld, Hell is Tartarus, Elysium is basically heaven. Okay, so then from what I like, because I like I said, I just rapidly reread through the book, right? So what I would, what I think what we you would want to establish if you were going to do something about this is that like this is not really a waiting room. This isn't really an underworld. This is like Odysseus has gone to this plane of existence and performed a ritual to speak to people who are in either of those two places or Hades in general. And they are all like the shades of them come around because the ritual has been performed. and he can get
Yeah.
some like yeah, this
But
is
it's
not
presented as
yeah.
very it's presented like knowing very little as I do about, the sort of ins and outs of the afterlife in Greek mythology. The way it's presented in the movie to a modern audience is that it's like hell. It's the underworld. Everything is sort of like barren and volcanic and dirty and muddy and grimy. They like rise up from the dirt. You know what I mean? You know, we don't see it. It's described as like a river of fire and a river of ice, but it's hellish, right? It's not like neutral. So yeah, like I said, I could understand why someone would watch it and go like, wait, why is Sinan there? Are they there because they've been betrayed by Odysseus and they like wouldn't be stuck here if they weren't? A little unclear by the movie's logic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the movie might also say, and I might have just missed it because of the audio mixing. Um, the movie might have said that he went to a specific location on Earth where he could summon the dead. I maybe I don't really recall that, but it's possible, right? Like,
I
I
thought
thought
it
he
was the logic was there's like an entrance to Hades that she describes to him as being like the meeting of a river of fire and a river of ice. That's what I remember, but maybe I'm
which
missing
Dave
the finer
assumed meant
details.
Iceland since they had a Viking boat. That's funny. Didn't put those two together actually, but yeah, like hell is Iceland confirmed. Thanks, Nolan. We got it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Was there anything else specific apart from the horse and Elliot Page that I wanted to complain about?
do
The
you want to complain about Menelaus? Because I know you
Yes,
messaged
I
me a few
do.
times
Yes,
about that.
I do. I was very mad. Thank you. I was very upset with that part because that was the first scene that I saw. I was spoiled for that before I walked into the theater. Um, Menelaus showing, like, basically being presented as a borderline abusive husband to Helen after having taken her back and, like, doing his Punisher impression at the table, right? First of all, in the poem, he's described as fiery haired or red haired Menelaus, yet another
Future
representation,
erasure.
yeah,
Sad.
cultural erasure that they have stolen from us. I'm surprised they didn't make him black, honestly. Um, but, but, and that's in the Robert Fagles translation. I don't know what he's described as in the others. People keep saying golden haired. That might be true. I don't know. I prefer the fiery one because that's my boy. That's the only the only time that I see people who look like me in
On
movies.
screen and you feel
And
seen
in
and
yeah,
noticed, and that empowers
but
you to
so
go ahead.
in the poem, when Telemachus arrives in Sparta at Menelaus's castle, there's a big party going on. It's abundant in wealth because he's one of the two wealthiest people on the planet. Him and his brother, who's now dead, right? So like he's one of the wealthiest guys on the planet. He has gold and silver and all these beautiful objects d'art there to for the gods and everything like that. And he's very welcoming even though he doesn't know who Telemachus is right off the bat because they've never met, right? But he's welcoming and he's kind and he's friendly and he brings him in and he serves him and he talks to him a little bit. And then Helen enters the room and Helen comes down with a full royal retinue. She's got servants and she's given like the position of honor. There's a trail. People all applaud as she comes in and she presents gifts to the crowd. And she notices Telemachus and she expresses some regret for her part in the war. And this is something that you get from reading other historical sources like Herodotus, right? Which is another one. This one may not fly in a modern adaptation of the Odyssey, right? But there was an idea from the ancient Greeks that a woman who was either kidnapped or raped would have probably, if she survived it, in some way would have wanted it to happen because there's always the alternative of killing yourself to preserve your honor. That was sort of the idea, culturally speaking, for the ancient Greeks. So, with that context, Helen has been kidnapped or spirited away by the goddess Aphrodite to Paris, or ran off with Paris. One of those, it's left up in
It's
the air,
unclear. Yeah.
unclear. But she expresses regret through both poems at having basically not having the courage to just kill herself to preserve the honor of her husband and of herself, right? And in the or in the charging the siege of Troy, when they come in and get everything, Menelaus is intending to kill her, but she comes to him and throws herself at his feet and begs for his forgiveness, and he picks her up and embraces her, and he forgives her, right? And then in this scene, as she comes down to greet Telemachus, what happens is she expresses regret for her part again in the Trojan War, and Menelaus basically consoles her and says, "We're not. It's what's done is done. We're not talking about that now. You're back. You're home, and we have things to celebrate. We have stories to tell this boy about his great father. Let's all just enjoy ourselves." It that would have, much like Achilles be saying in the afterlife, the Achilles saying in the afterlife, he'd rather be a slave and alive than dead as a warrior with glory, right? This would have been mind blowing and subversive at the time of the poem's publication. Like, there were ancient Greek boys who were, like, consoling their friends after their girlfriends cheated on them, being like, "Look, man, even Menelaus forgave Helen, and that whole war happened because of her." Like, that is,
Well, well, I mean, not even like consoling them if they cheated, like
yeah,
because that's slightly different. But like consoling them if their like
yeah.
girlfriends or wives were raped,
So yeah,
essentially.
exactly. Like, there, that would have been so subversive at the time. What we do instead is we make it that Menelaus has. It was implied that Menelaus took out his vengeance on her by disfiguring her face, and that he is really angry with her, and they're kind of in a broken marriage, but they're keeping it up for political purposes.
Yeah. So, okay, because the original is kind of what's happening there, at least as you describe it, is like there's an original sort of law or sort of moral code sort of governing these things in ancient Greece that's like pretty barbaric by modern standards, where if like a woman is kidnapped and raped, uh, she must have secretly wanted it if she didn't kill herself instead. It's like, oof, that's rough. But what's kind of happening in the story is we're getting a narrative that helps people get out of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that helps people move on to change that attitude, essentially, like
that's
that.
essentially Homer being like, maybe that's a little harsh.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe we
Yeah,
shouldn't expect
yeah. Maybe
that.
we shouldn't kill them for
Yeah,
having been raped. Like that's pretty brutal. You know what I mean? And so like that, what's happening there, the same way that like when people sometimes atheists will criticize like the whole story of Abraham and Isaac is like, oh, look how brutal it is, like how barbaric the child sacrifice is. And it's like, well, the point of that story is a kind of narrative way of moving past child sacrifice. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because child sacrifice was the norm, and then it moves out of that through stories like this. And so pointing to that story as something like barbaric, that like, oh, if we adapted it to modern times, we'd have to get rid of that. And it's like, well, then you'd be losing the story. In the same way here, essentially, that like losing that bit, losing, and part of the reason, that he doesn't just kill her for, having been raped or like put under the influence of a goddess and, flown away or whatever, uh, is like the fact that she's the most beautiful woman in the world, right? She's kind of an ideal
Hmm.
of the feminine and the beauty, and so like it would be wrong to destroy that. But then that logic can extend downward to other women in the future. You know what I mean? So like this is like a narrative of a changing value system, and like it's like providing the narrative framework to like evolve these sort of value systems. And Nolan's like, well, I'm not going to include the part where clearly it would be normal in society to kill her for having been kidnapped and raped, because that's pretty brutal. You're also missing the part where that actually makes the forgiveness more important
Yeah.
and more meaningful. And then he also just loses the forgiveness too, because now the movie is not clear about this. It's not clear about whether in the movie's logic she was kidnapped or whether went away willingly, like cheated essentially, or whether she was controlled by Aphrodite or whoever. Um, Not clear, but either way, the movie's logic is well, that wasn't really the actual pretense of of the war anyway. That was just an excuse to rile the people up. Really, it was just about trade routes. But nonetheless, she still either ran off with Paris or was taken away with Paris. And that's a clear violation of Zeus's law, but the movie doesn't think that that's what broke the universe. It's the Trojan horse trick. Never mind how that
Well,
makes no
because it
sense.
didn't matter really that she ran off with Paris. That wasn't the point of the war. You know, there wasn't
Exactly.
like a
So I guess that
like a
doesn't count.
NATO like alliance set up because everybody wanted to marry Helen because she was just so damn
Oh,
beautiful, right? There wasn't a
and
NATO like
daughter of Zeus. That's
and the
another
daughter of
important
Zeus.
detail.
Yeah, they didn't have a
Yeah.
NATO like alliance set up between the kings or anything that like they would all have to guarantee the marriage because she chose Menelaus and everybody had wanted her, but this way nobody would steal her. But Paris violates that agreement at basically because a god makes him do it, right?
Yeah.
And that completely drags everybody into it. Yeah, no, it's not really. It was really just about trade routes and economy. It's
Really dumb.
and she has an identical twin sister. So what's the big deal? The most beautiful woman in the world has a fucking identical twin.
That was an odd choice, to say the
Very
very least.
so basically what Christopher Nolan did is he made a big stink for a few months about casting a black woman as the most beautiful woman in the world, and then said the war actually wasn't about her beauty, and actually she wasn't even all that like special. What did he mean by
But
this? Do we
but he
think?
did get the good boy points for casting her as the most beautiful woman in the world, and that was
Well,
enough for
one of
people.
them.
So, well,
Well,
So okay, but rewinding, right? Because now either she either did something bad by willingly running off with Paris, or she was kidnapped. Unclear. The movie doesn't really say. But when she returns, now instead of forgiving her at all, he resents her for it and even mocks the fact that her beauty, that he also seems to mock, is what caused the war in the first place. And he disfigured her. That's the implication, that he beat her about the face. And so Helen now in this is maybe someone who cheated on her husband, maybe didn't. It's unclear, but either way, she's resented for it and has been beaten and disfigured as a result of it. And she regrets not that she did anything wrong, but that the war was like launched in her name, and she feels bad about that and kind of has to be told that that wasn't her fault. So basically, what was a more interesting story, now she's just kind of like an innocent victim to some like shitty
to the
drunk
patriarchal,
guy.
drunk
Yeah.
Greek ancient system, to the Bronze Age
So
system that
Menelaus
impoverishes women.
Menelaus was something of a noble figure for his willingness to forgive her. I mean, relatively.
Yeah.
He was a good guy in most narrative terms, right? But
Also a heroic figure, right? Like
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. That's part of the good guyness, as far as I'm concerned. So, what does that choice tell us about Christopher Nolan's intentions, right?
Yeah. We've taken a
Like, what?
heroic figure who was willing to forgive his wife despite the fact that society was telling him that it was entirely her fault for basically for the whole Trojan War, right? But he was willing to forgive her. Maybe her being the daughter of Zeus had something to do with it. You don't want to piss Zeus off by
Yeah,
killing.
partially that, but mostly that, like, she's kind of like, I don't know. It's a little bit like we talked about this before with the character like Snow White, who is like represents sort of paragons of certain virtues, and so they inspire virtue in others. Like that's because the Helen of Troy like is beauty itself,
Yeah, like kind of
narratively
like
speaking.
Galadriel, right? Like she is
Yes.
beauty, and she is beauty, she is grace, right? Like
Yes, but unironically, yes.
yeah. And it's like inspirational. It makes people and aspirational. It makes people want
Yes.
to be better and to do better, Senator, right? Like that's
Yeah. So that is a very, 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 very cynical change that doesn't really affect the story either way. It doesn't affect Odysseus's journey, really.
yeah. So like people there, because there are a lot of people who are apologizing for like the backlash against this casting choice from prior to the movie's release, and I've seen so many of them. It's like we owe these actors an apology because they're really only on screen for like 6 minutes. Like no, 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 no. That is not what we do not owe them an apology for any of this because though like even if they're only on screen for a few minutes, right? Their presence and the way that the story around them is handled destroys it is an assassination of the characters from the source, and it's an assassination of what they
Yes.
stand for and represent in that story,
Yes.
which changes the fundamental value of the story and makes it ugly and cynical and modern.
Yes. And um the fact that they have so little screen time makes those changes more pointless, right? Like it's almost worse what they change with Helen and Menelaus because it doesn't actually impact anything. It's just there to be like ugly and cynical and
Yeah,
modern. You
yeah.
know, because it doesn't really affect the story at all. It's just like it's just something we tell Telemachus and he's like, "Oh, okay. Do you have any stories about my dad though?" Like that's all that comes of it, really. You know what I mean? I don't know, but it's just in keeping with the rest of the changes he made, you know. And the other thing is, as we mentioned before, like the casting choices are a problem on their own, right? Like for example, Matt Damon is not a great choice for Odysseus anyway. You know what I mean? There are characters in this movie that like we talked about before, if we're like shooting for the ideal of everyone looks believably like they could be from ancient Greece, it's not like Matt Damon really looks like he's from ancient Greece either. But is like we have to admit that there is a spectrum here, right? There is a spectrum between Lupita Nyong'o and Matt Damon and the perfect ideal, like ancient Greek looking actor, right? And so being further away from what it should be is worse.
Shall we
And
consult the map once more? I'll put it up on screen for you briefly.
yeah, and as I mentioned before, the fact that the cast, the whole world is populated with a very very diverse cast of people is a kind of problem in and of itself. So it's like, yeah, the fact that they have little screen time at best is irrelevant. At worst, it like actually makes some of these changes even more perplexing and unjustifiable, I would say.
Somebody just asked, how does it compare to his Great Wall performance? And honestly, like, I haven't
I
seen the
haven't seen
box
it.
office numbers, but I bet you in China, like, it will take off because he's in the movie, right? Like, it's going to make another, yeah, just because they love him so much. I forgot about Great Wall. Oh, whoops. Sorry, chat. I hid you there for a second. I hid you instead of the map. The map is the
Ah,
important part.
yeah.
Okay, go back. But yeah, someone said he doesn't think that there was a single good casting choice. Honestly, funnily enough, John Leguizamo is pretty good.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like him. Like I like Robert
But which
Pattinson too, but John Leguizamo is doing a pretty good job, which is hilarious considering
and he
that
also
like
has enough old makeup on that, like, the fact that normally John Leguizamo does not look Greek at all isn't as distracting, you know, because he's just covered in old age makeup. Like, it's not ideal, but he gives a good performance, and he's less distracting to me than a lot of the other casting choices. But in general, this is a very poorly cast movie. I agree with that.
yeah, overall,
Even Robert Pattinson is like he's like bringing fun energy to a movie like sorely lacking it. It doesn't mean I actually really think he's a perfect choice for this character. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but in a much better movie, if like in like an ideal version of this movie where like the worst thing about it was that they cast Robert Pattinson among a sea of people who do look the part more than him, I'd be like, ah, that's fine because he's fun. Like it's not the end of the world. But as is, he's in a movie that he's just, I don't, yeah, casting is terrible all around, I would say.
yeah. I like
It is also really funny that John Leguizamo is one of the better performances in the movie, considering how obnoxious he is about representation. He's a total hypocrite, you know. But like a lot of these people are just looking out for their group.
yeah.
It's like there's no other way to
It's
put it. They care about their representation. They don't care about yours. And in this case, yours is Greeks. They don't care about your Greek representation, but they do. Obviously, Latino representation is very important to John Leguizamo. And it's funny. I almost made this joke on a stream the other day, but you know, we can all have fun and joke about like who is and isn't technically white. Like, are the Italians white? Are the Greeks white? Are the Irish white? We can all have fun, right? But the left clearly thinks that the Greeks are white, and you can tell because they're not mad about this movie.
yeah.
That's how you can
That's how
tell.
you know. Yeah, it's funny because like I remember back in my Big Fat Greek Wedding days, right, when that movie came out, and that was like Greek was considered an odd, off the beaten path kind of cultural heritage to have. That was like
Yeah.
the whole point of that movie was the fact that like white people didn't understand Greeks, right?
Yeah.
They look at how far and how fast they've come. Welcome to the
Welcome to the
club.
club. Exactly.
You
You're part of the team now. You're white whether you like it or not. We're all
you came through a lot quicker than the Italians, let me tell you. Like
That's true.
we really gave them some shit before we finally relented
Well,
and
yeah,
let
they
them
had
in.
mobs.
Yeah.
So why would we? That's the thing that this is a side tangent. I don't want to get too off beaten path here, but when people go like, this anti-immigration rhetoric is just it's the same thing they said to the Italians and the Irish in the early part of the 20th century. It's like, yeah, and they were right to. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of organized crime, but they did a lot of it, and I think there was actually reason to be suspicious about their willingness to integrate. And so, if they had problems, considering how culturally proximate, all things considered, the Irish are to like an English culture, just imagine we started importing millions of people from somewhere even more remote, even more culturally distant. What would happen? Can you imagine such a thing?
Oh my
Anyway,
goodness. Well,
sorry, just had to
no,
had to get that off my chest a little bit
yeah,
there.
that might be about the extent of
Don't tell
my
me that's how we're gonna end it. That's it's not.
what with like welcoming the Greeks to the white people club? That seems
Okay.
like a
Well, that
pretty
part
like
that's a cheerier note than
yeah.
me going off on a little rant.
We've welcomed the Greeks into the white people club.
Yeah, you're on our team
Like
now. You
yeah,
can.
welcome. Welcome to
I
the chat.
would love to see a version of this is part of the frustration ultimately with everything we've talked about with the Odyssey is that a movie like this doesn't actually come around very often, especially at this scale and budget level. Nolan had every bit of clout and reputation and money, considering this movie cost $250 million, to make the kind of Odyssey movie that we would have good reason to be proud of. But he didn't do that. Instead, he mucked about with it to tell a very lame, very unfun, uninspired, and kind of morally and thematically confused liberal modern retelling of an ancient myth, because that's the only story he's really interested in telling anymore. And that's a
Yeah.
shame. He blew an opportunity that we won't get back for a while. We won't have this opportunity to like retry the Odyssey anytime soon. Maybe, in 10, 20 years, we can get like an Aeneid or something to balance it out or whatever that's
Yeah.
actually faithful to the source material. But that's what's most frustrating about it is that like he had no excuse essentially. He had
Yeah.
no excuse, but he blew it, and I think he made a movie that is like Barbie in that it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah.
You can't call it a great movie because there's too many things that just don't fit, that contradict each other and are very like thematically confused. And so the discourse about it has been particularly annoying because of how contradictory it is and how everyone's treating it like a Rorschach test basically. But eventually, especially once award season dies down, I think this movie's just gonna kind of disappear. I
Fade
think it's
into
gonna disappear
the
from
category of
conversation.
yet another billion-dollar blockbuster that has absolutely zilch for cultural relevance, much like Avatar or Endgame.
There'll be some memes like they get these beggars out of here, and like
Get
Matt
these
Damon's funny
beggars out
face
of
when he's hearing the siren song. Like those things will survive,
yeah.
and people will of course maintain that it's good, especially when we do career retrospectives. Whenever Nolan eventually passes
When
away,
you talk to anybody at the water cooler at your office in 5 years, they're gonna say, "Oh yeah, man, I really liked the Odyssey. I've never thought Christopher Nolan. He's never made a bad movie ever, because they only ever go see movies when Christopher Nolan makes them."
yeah, and so I think ultimately the real test of like cultural staying power this movie will not pass, whereas Homer's The Odyssey will still be talked about and still be shared and transmitted to future generations for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So
Well, when we win,
ultimately, the
we're
good
gonna put it
story
back in
wins.
schools. books, not the
Yes.
not this movie.
Ultimately, the good story wins, but for now, we're just in a rather annoying period where people. Yeah, I do find it very annoying that this movie is lauded as a masterpiece. That it really bothers me.
Yeah.
It annoys the crap out of me. But I basically said everything I have to say about it at this point. Hopefully, I'll
Yeah.
never have to think about it
I did
again.
not care for it. I did not care for the Odyssey. It insists upon itself. Bryce Mwenda is asking if I'm more of an Odyssey or an Iliad guy. More of the Iliad. I'm more of an Iliad guy. I like the war, the rage, the Shakespearean drama between the two. That really I like the adventure of the Odyssey. I like the twists and turns, but I just really like the pure just it's just a pure game, you know. I'm just watching. I'm watching football, like good football, when I'm reading the Iliad. You know, that just gets me. I like that one. That one.
Really quick before we leave, we did miss one other super chat, but it's a very simple one from Mark Conan who says PTA arc several times over. Might be something we do
I
eventually
wouldn't
because
mind doing that.
he
Honestly, I've
certainly has
played like
enough
the
bangers, and I'd like to rewatch Phantom Thread, for example, because I liked that when it came out. Anyway,
yeah.
he's got some bangers.
I do like
We'll
lists of all of those ships. I do like to hear all the ships and everybody who was on it at the time. You know, the Odyssey does some of that shit too, but
yeah.
not nearly as. No, I'll be honest. I kind of just glaze over those parts. There are big. The Iliad is a really big book and very intimidating on first glance, but once you realize how much of it is just listing off people from different places that fought in the war, essentially like to get like a little kind of like shouting out like, oh, who's from Atlanta out here, you know, in a concert or something, and everybody applauds who's from Atlanta, and then they go, and who's from Washington DC, and then it does the same thing, right? Like it does a little bit like there's a lot of that, and you can just skip it. You can just like glaze right on over it. You don't need to know all those
A
names.
lot of myths are like
Yeah,
that because they're doing something that was very relevant to the people listening to it that isn't quite as relevant now, where they're like, and this place that you know is named after this character from this story, and then they go, oh, and I'm like, skip.
yeah.
I'll skip that. Just get back to the story, please. For me, I'm impatient.
Yeah,
I'm an
I've like
impatient modern person.
big swathes of like, and the nice thing is that like when you're reading it in the Robert Fagles version, it's in free verse, so it's in poetry, so you feel like you're getting a lot done by just, oh, that's more ship lists, more ship lists, more ship. Okay, now I'm 5 pages down, and we're back in the action. It's pretty
Yeah, yeah.
great, you know. I
Are
love
y'all
it.
looking forward to prime time? I'm curious about it.
Is
It's
is
hard to
is
tell from
that
the
the Robert Pattinson movie with as Chris
yeah, the
Hansen?
Robert Pattinson, Chris
I
Hansen
mean,
movie. I watched the
I
trailer.
like what I'm seeing from him. I'll tell you that
I
much.
like what I'm seeing from him. Uh, To Catch a Predator is a really interesting show. I watched the trailer for the movie, and I'm like, in potentially a good way, but I had a hard time reading like what the movie was going to say about To Catch a Predator and Chris Hansen. It seemed like they were going in a Nightcrawler direction, so we'll see exactly
Yeah, that's
how.
interesting because he is a
We'll
little
see.
bit odd on that, right? Like he does have that sort of vibe, like he's chasing, like the actual Chris Hansen does have that sort of
Yeah,
vibe, like he's
a little
sort of
bit,
chasing the spotlight,
but
but like he's doing a
chasing the
good
spotlight.
thing.
Yeah, so it's complicated, and hopefully the movie will be like complicated in a good way, where it just kind of, I mean, it looks very artsy in a way, which I like could be really cool, could be kind of like a crutch or distracting. We'll see. I am looking forward to it. I think it'll be interesting if nothing else. The
Yeah.
movie that's coming out most soonest that I'm actually very excited for, I think is already out, but only in like a very, very limited sense, is The Samurai and the Prisoner. That is a
I was
movie
looking for it and
I'm
I still can't find it in
very
theaters
excited
around
to
me, but I
see.
want to see that movie.
That's one of the few that I'm actually very, 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 very excited to see because that trailer hit me like a freight train. I was like, "Holy crap, that looks awesome!" So, one of the few things I'm very, very excited for. So hopefully, once we are both able to see that, I insist on reviewing it.
Yes, yes. I'm I really want to see that one.
Do
Um,
you know what we're talking about next week, Hubert?
I I don't. Uh, do
Do
you?
we want to say now, or do we want to decide off screen and have it be a surprise for the fun people at home?
I think we let's decide off screen and give them a little bit of suspense. They'll have to come back
All
and
right,
yeah, like
sounds good.
check to see what it is.
So that's the Odyssey.
Yeah,
Well, that's a discussion about the Odyssey specifically.
and a little
Um,
bit about the movie. The
a little bit.
things, yeah, like it's, my take. It premieres on the internet 2 weeks later. Um,
Yeah,
in 2 more weeks,
gotta
we'll
have
talk
that
about
take.
Spider-Man. Uh,
I don't want to
actually,
do
probably
that.
not. I don't want to do
I
that.
don't want to do
I
that.
don't want to do
No,
that.
thank you. Well, anyway, thanks for joining us, and thank you for the super chats. I think we said all that we really had to say about the Odyssey, so now we never have to
Yes.
think about it again. That's
That's
the
true.
hope.
Real quick too, before we go, because I'm seeing a couple of comments about Troy, which, like I said, I did rewatch that in preparation for this movie. Troy is okay. I don't like the modernization stuff that they do, considering how much I enjoy the role the gods play in the Iliad. But everything from the fight between Achilles and Hector, right on down to the end, is fucking awesome. It's really, really good. Really entertaining stuff. The stuff before that, there's good things sprinkled in, but like really, once that happens, the movie hits its stride and goes absolutely balls to the wall. It's so good. I really like especially the last half of the movie. So overall, I would probably give it like a 6 out of 10. But that's like I really, really like the back half of that movie. So there you go.
Well, there you go. Thanks for joining us for this Odyssey of a discussion. We'll see you next time for whatever that may be. Who knows? We'll find out. But we'll be talking about the internet. We'll be
Talking about the
talking about
internet,
the
live about
on
movies,
movie.
live
Yes,
on
exactly.
movies.
You heard that right. And we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thanks again for the super chats. And bye bye.
Bye
Hasta la
bye.
vista. Toodaloo.